Marvel's Magic Master. The main world, the universe where Marvel Doctor Strange is located. The magical world of clones, Harry Potter, Fairy Tale, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, A Certain Magical Index, The Lord of the Rings, The Battle of the Two Castles, Fate, Warcraft, Cardcaptor Sakura, Merlin, etc. Golden Finger. Every once in a while, in a different magical world, a controllable clone will be awakened. The clone has no restrictions on gender and race. All clones share the same innate abilities as the original body, their strengths are simultaneously enhanced, and there is only one will. Chapter 1. Artificial Mutant Experiment Number 757. Doctor, the test results of Subject 757 are out. What level? Level 2. Level 2, that is, even if the ability is fully developed, it can only do shallow mind reading and magnetic control of no more than 50 kilograms. Yes, Doctor, according to our current research data on mutants. It seems that it is impossible to merge the genes of Professor X and Magneto to create the strongest artificial mutant. Let's stop this experiment and focus on the research of X-24. He is our strongest weapon. Should the experimental subject number 757 be disposed of like the previous experimental subjects? Keep it and train it with those kids. After all, it is a genetic fusion of Professor X and Magneto. Even if it is only level 2, it will be useful if it is well developed. Yes, Doctor. Number 757, be decisive and ruthless. Attack my vitals. Don't hesitate, you waste. On the training ground, a muscular man holding a dagger was launching a fierce attack on a young man of 17 or 18 years old. The young man used his ability to control the dagger to defend and block, while trying to find an opportunity to fight back with his fists, but it was obvious that he was not skilled enough and could not make a good judgment. Also controlling magnetism, my control of magnetism is too inferior to Magneto's. The young man's surname is Qiao Mingzi. He is a time traveler. 3 months ago, he traveled through the body of this artificial genetic mutant called experimental subject number 757. His mutant abilities are mind reading and magnetic control. Unfortunately, his mind reading can only succeed when the opponent is completely unprepared, and it can only read the current mental state, not the memory deep in the mind. And his control over magnetism is even worse. At present, he can only control things weighing less than 10 kilograms. Although it is not bad if used well, it is far inferior to Magneto, who can lift the entire stadium at any time. It is okay to deal with ordinary people, but if you encounter a person who is good at defense like the Stone Man, Colossus, and the White Queen, you can't break the defense at all. His current goal is to find a way to escape from this cruel laboratory. Ring, ring, ring. A harsh bell rang, and a staff member in a white coat came in, stopped the training, and put a high-tech instrument on his neck. Experimental subject number 757, you should have dinner. Yes. George replied in a somewhat stiff voice, and then followed the staff member out of the room very obediently. The instrument worn on his neck is called a mutant inhibitor. Once worn on his neck, his abilities will completely disappear and he will become an ordinary person. Normally, he must wear this inhibitor except for training and fighting. Walking in the long corridor, in addition to him, there are many mutants brought out by staff from various training grounds. However, they are younger and look only 12 or 13 years old. Marvel World, this is really a dangerous world. Seeing this scene, George couldn't help but sigh. From the moment he knew that he was a mutant, he knew that he came to the Marvel world. He still knows a little about Marvel, after all, he occasionally watches movies, but he is not a senior Marvel fan. As far as he knows, there are many universes in the Marvel world, and the stories that happen in different universes are also different, but it is certain that few universes are peaceful. It's not too scary to make half of the people in the entire universe disappear like Thanos did, and it's normal for some to lose a whole universe. But since you have come here, you can only try to survive. Who wants to die when they can live? He is a person who loves life very much. If possible, he wants to be immortal. Some people say that immortality is a curse. Watching people around him die one by one is very painful. But he thinks that compared with the benefits of immortality, the small price is nothing. Who in our great Chinese does not want to cultivate immortality? The old Qin unified the 6 kingdoms and sent his men to find him the elixir of immortality. Based on his observations in the past month, he can now roughly determine that the Marvel world he is in may have a lot of connections with the world of Wolverine 3. Because he saw the little wolf girl among these children, X-23, who has the same self-healing ability and adamantium claws as Wolverine. But what makes him feel strange is that the current time is not 2029 in the movie, but 2009. And from the usual gossip of those staff members, we can also learn that this universe also has Playboy Tony Stark and Captain America. According to the timeline of Wolverine 3, the little wolf girl was not born in 2009, but the little girl in front of him with a determined look is obviously about 12 or 13 years old. So this is not the mutant universe, nor the Marvel movie universe, but a Marvel universe that he doesn't know. It doesn't matter if the time doesn't match, as long as what should happen can happen. Whether it is 2029 or 2009, it doesn't really matter to him. He just hopes that the mutant children can escape from prison as usual, so that he can have a chance to escape from this laboratory. According to the plot of Wolverine 3, it shouldn't be long before a kind female nurse will help these mutant children escape from the laboratory. In order to maintain an honest, obedient, and easy-to-control personality, George, as usual, did not communicate with anyone. After dinner, he quietly returned to his room and closed his eyes to sleep. The entire laboratory is full of surveillance cameras. He must hide any emotions to prevent being seen as abnormal, so as to reduce the staff's vigilance against him. In order to reduce vigilance, he even deliberately hid some of his strength during training, such as controlling the speed of the dagger attack and some ideas about his abilities. Of course, he can't show too much, otherwise he might be treated as garbage. What's going on? It hurts. In his sleepy eyes, George suddenly felt a pain as if his soul was torn apart, but this pain came and went quickly, and did not torture him too much. But after the pain, he found that he seemed to have entered a very strange state. He opened his eyes suddenly, and two completely different perspectives appeared in his eyes. One is the vision of his laboratory bedroom that he can see normally now, and the other is in a very shabby small compartment. At the same time, he felt that he suddenly had another body, and that body could be controlled as freely as his current body. How to describe it? It was like he suddenly had an extra clone that he could control. The original body closed his eyes and lay back on the bed, and he focused his mind mainly on the clone. Suddenly, a series of memories flashed through his mind like a movie. After these memories flashed, he couldn't help but mutter, "Here." It turned out to be Harry Potter's Wizard World. The 11-year-old child in the memory was called Dora. She was originally an orphan in an orphanage. Later, because of the strange performance of wizard blood, she was adopted by a wizard in Nocturne Alley. But this wizard is not a good person, but a hidden dark wizard. The purpose of his adoption of Dora was just to conduct dark magic experiments and potion experiments, plus an extra free labor. After all, if muggles were used for experiments, it would easily attract the attention of the Ministry of Magic, but using his own adopted son was different. As long as he doesn't say it, who can find out? Even if he dies accidentally one day, it can be said that it was an accident. Moreover, many black magic and potions have different effects on muggles and wizards. Only by using wizards can the effect be better tested. In this way, poor Dora grew up under the torture of the Black Wizard. Because of the long-term torture, Dora's character is very cowardly. He dare not resist the Black Wizard, nor dare to tell others about his situation. He lives a miserable life every day, which is worse than that of a house elf. Dora originally hoped that Hogwarts would enroll at the age of 11 so that he could escape the clutches of the Black Wizard. Unfortunately, he did receive an admission notice, but the Black Wizard did not intend to let him go to Hogwarts to study. For a little wizard born in a Muggle family, as long as he is 11 years old, he will definitely be admitted to Hogwarts regardless of whether his parents agree or not. Because if the little wizard does not learn magic, does not know how to dredge magic, and has fear and disgust for his unknown abilities, he is likely to become an obscurus under extreme emotions, which is absolutely not allowed in the magic world. But for children of wizards, there are not so many requirements. Wizard parents can not only choose Hogwarts, but also other magic schools such as Bos Batons, Durmstrang, and Ilvermorny. They can even send their children to magic training classes for cheap, or wizard parents can teach their children magic themselves. Dora completely collapsed after learning from the Dark Wizard that she could not go to Hogwarts and committed suicide by drinking potion in her cubicle at night. And for some reason, George's split soul occupied Dora's body at this time and became the new owner of this body. It's really miserable. After reading Dora's memory, George couldn't help but sigh. Come here. I don't know if it was the sequelae of Dora's suicide by taking potion. George felt very thirsty now, and subconsciously activated his ability to the iron cup on the table. And the cup quickly flew into his hands. He raised his hand and drank the water in the cup in one gulp, and George was suddenly stunned. My ability! I can actually use this body to activate it. Yes, he just used the mutant's control over magnetism, but it was not the original body that was using it, but the clone in this world. Could it be that the innate abilities of the two worlds can be shared? At this time, George had a bold guess in his mind. Turn his attention to the original body again, and he did find that there was something more in Marvel's original body. In terms of wizard common sense in Dora's memory, that is the unique magic in the wizard's blood. If that's the case, that would be great. At this moment, a series of plans have been unfolding in George's mind. Chapter 2. The Murder of a Dark Wizard. Ability sharing means that as long as his clone learns all kinds of magical magic in the Harry Potter world, his original body in the Marvel world can also use it. Although he doesn't have a wand in the Marvel world, it doesn't matter. According to him, not everyone in the Harry Potter world uses a wand to cast spells. High-level wizards can cast without a wand, and wizards in Africa have been using traditional hand gestures to cast spells. It's just that the wand is released faster and has better effects, so most wizards choose to use a wand to cast spells. Or he can learn to make a wand himself later. There are many things with special energy in the Marvel world, and it may not be impossible to find suitable materials for making a wand. Although the magic in the Harry Potter world is not very destructive, it is very functional, and some magic feels like it touches very high-level rules. Apart from anything else, as long as he can learn to apparition, at least in the Marvel world, facing most enemies, he can escape even if he can't beat them. But before that, think about how to kill the Black Wizard reasonably. Killing people, if it was George in his previous life, he really didn't dare. In his previous life, he was just a social animal. He had never killed a chicken, let alone killed anyone. When he went to the supermarket to buy vegetables, he bought naked chickens that had been processed by others. However, in this life, he got used to it in just 3 months. Because in these 3 months, he had killed 12 people in actual combat. The laboratory does not keep waste. As a mutant who is trained to be a killer in the future, in addition to normal ability practice, he is learning how to kill people. And the fastest way is actual combat. He has no choice, because if he does not kill people in actual combat, he will be killed. This is also one of the reasons why he is eager to escape from the laboratory. Although he is not a great good man, he has his own bottom line and does not like to kill innocent people. In fact, he can also choose to report the Dark Wizard. At this time, he reports the Dark Wizard to the Ministry of Magic, and there is a high probability that he will succeed. It just so happens that he lives with the Dark Wizard in Nocturne Alley, and it is easy to contact Aurors. Dora dare not do this because she grew up in the torture of the Dark Wizard since she was a child. The fear of the Dark Wizard has been engraved in her bones. She would rather commit suicide than resist. However, this may leave a problem. That is, if the Aurors do not take action in time, the Dark Wizard will have the opportunity to abscond with the money and may even retaliate against him. And if he can kill the Dark Wizard without leaving any trace, then he can not only eliminate the problem, but also inherit all the inheritance of the Dark Wizard. Through Dora's memory, he knew that the Dark Wizard had no relatives long ago. Once the Dark Wizard died, he, the adopted son, would be the only heir. Besides, he was not without confidence. First of all, the Dark Wizard had no defense against him at all. Because in the eyes of the Dark Wizard, Dora was a very timid child who did not even have a wand and had not learned any spells. Secondly, he had the experience of using his ability to control blades to kill ordinary mercenaries in single combat. When a wizard is attacked without defense, his reaction ability will not be much faster than that of an ordinary person. At most, he has a special physique and is not so easy to die. Finally, because he did not use magic and did not have a wand, the probability of being discovered by the Aurors afterwards was also very small. Of course, it is hard to say whether this kind of thing is impossible or not. But wealth and honor come with risk. If this job is successful, he will not only have a house in this world, but also a lot of wealth, enough for him to concentrate on studying and learning magic in the early stage. As far as he knows, the dark wizards have made a lot of money by selling various banned potions over the years. You got up half an hour late today. Do you want me to use the transfiguration spell again to turn you into a mouse and hang you up on the candle to roast? Just as George was thinking, the door of the room was suddenly opened, and a bald old man in a black wizard robe looked at George with cold eyes like a snake. Sorry, Mr. Merlin, I'll be there right away. George imitated Dora's usual terrified look and quickly got up and dressed. Seeing this, the bald old wizard narrowed his eyes and said, "Little Dora, don't worry. Although I helped you reject the admission notice of Hogwarts, as long as you serve me well as before, I will teach you some powerful magic, which will not be worse than going to Hogwarts." Powerful magic, probably all magic such as cleaning and cooking. George muttered inwardly, but on the surface he still looked obedient. Coming out of the small room, the sun had just risen outside, and the time was about 6:30 in the morning. Marvel is at night, and here is daytime, which is quite convenient. He still felt a little strange to control two bodies at the same time. Now he could adapt to sleeping at night and moving during the day. After leaving the small room under the corridor, according to Dora's memory, he began to prepare breakfast for the old wizard, clean the shop, stand at the door to attract customers, etc. as usual. There are not many normal customers in the potion shop in Nocturne Alley. Normal wizards will not go to Nocturne Alley to buy potions. There is a regular potion shop in Diagon Alley. Most of the people who come here to buy potions are dark wizards, or some wizards who do not obey the laws of the Ministry of Magic. For such behavior, the Ministry of Magic usually turns a blind eye. Almost all wizards know what is in Nocturne Alley, so how can the Ministry of Magic not know it? In George's opinion, this is also a very normal situation. Instead of letting the dark wizards mess around in private, it is better to leave a Nocturne Alley. In this way, if something goes wrong, there will be clues to track down. Moreover, many upper-class wizards in the wizarding world also need the existence of Nocturne Alley. Lucius Malfoy, who has a distinguished status in the wizarding world, occasionally resells the banned potions and magic items he brews here for money. In this way, until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, George finally found a suitable opportunity to make a move. I want to brew a madness potion. Close the shop temporarily and guard the door. Don't let anyone disturb me, otherwise I will make you live a life worse than death. The old wizard carefully took out the precious magic herbs from several boxes and glared at George fiercely. George immediately lowered his head and trembled and replied, "Yes, yes, I will definitely not let anyone disturb you." The old wizard's words were not a threat. Dora was negligent before, causing the old wizard to be disturbed by the guests while refining the potion, resulting in the failure of the potion. The old wizard used black magic to torment the old wizard for a whole night, and he almost died. However, this is also a great opportunity for George to kill the old wizard. According to what he learned from Dora's memory, the madness potion is a high-level potion. Once taken, the whole person's mind will be in chaos, and he will become a madman. So it is worth a lot of money. However, the preparation of this potion is very difficult and the refining process is also dangerous. If the operation is not done well, it is easy to cause an explosion, causing the wizard to be injured or even killed. In fact, the refining of potions, especially the refining of high-level potions, is not a safe thing. Almost every year, wizards die accidentally because of refining potions. This is also one of the reasons why high-level potions in the wizarding world are expensive, but there are few powerful potion makers. Seeing the old wizard walk into the special potion refining hut in the backyard, George immediately closed the door of the shop, walked quietly to the window next to the hut, and began to peek. The old wizard took out herbs such as arioth, poisonous tentacles, lace wings, and two-headed snake gallbladder in front of the potion-making vessel, and began to process them one by one, and then put them into the crucible to boil. The old wizard did not teach Dora any magic, but in order to enable him to better serve customers, he taught him a lot of knowledge of herbalism and potion science. So according to Dora's memory, George knew that the wizard was most likely to have problems when brewing potions. Because at this time, the wizard not only had to cast the corresponding spell wholeheartedly, but also had to continuously input magic power to blend the potion. Explode for me. After enduring for a full hour, seeing that the old wizard finally reached the stage of boiling the potion, George immediately activated his ability, causing the candlestick on the table to collapse unexpectedly, knocking over the crucible that was being boiled. The paste-like potion immediately fell on the table and merged with the herbs on the table that had not been used up. Not good. The old wizard quickly interrupted the refining, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He wanted to cast a spell to defend himself, but as soon as he raised his wand, the paste-like potions exploded. The old wizard who was hit head-on was blown away, first hitting the wall of the hut hard, then fell down and spit out several mouthfuls of blood. The body of a wizard is indeed much stronger than that of an ordinary person. Seeing that the old wizard in his 70s or 80s was blown up like this, but he was not dead yet, George couldn't help but sigh in his heart. If it were an ordinary person, even a young and middle-aged man, he would probably be finished if he was hit like this. This is not a simple explosion, but an explosion caused by the failure of potion refining, mixed with the backlash of magic and the riot of magic power, not as simple as it seems on the surface. Then I'll give you another hard one. At this time, George's forehead was throbbing with veins, and he launched all his abilities at the chandelier above the hut. After possessing the blood of a wizard, he found that his mutant ability seemed to have improved a lot. Before, he only controlled a weight of 10 kilograms, but now with full strength, it is at least 50 kilograms. If it is fully developed in the future, it will definitely exceed the original limit of 100 kilograms. The chandelier, which was already shaky due to the explosion, fell from the roof in an instant under George's full control and pierced the face of the old wizard who had not yet reacted. Ah! A scream sounded, and the chandelier, under the influence of George's power, directly penetrated the old wizard's eyes and inserted into his brain. With the physique of a normal wizard, even if it is split, that is, missing arms and legs, as long as it does not die immediately, it can be saved with healing magic and potions, and even arms and legs can be completely reconnected. But if the brain is directly pierced like this, then except for the existence of Voldemort's level, few ordinary wizards can survive. Chapter 3. Inheritance. It seems that he is really dead. After waiting for about 5 minutes, seeing that the old wizard had not made any movement, George carefully pushed the door and walked in. After testing the old wizard's breathing and confirming that he was really dead, he breathed a sigh of relief. If he fought head-on against a dark wizard in his 70s or 80s, he would definitely not be his opponent. He protected his body with the armor charm, and then a simple stun charm could easily knock him down. As a dark wizard, he must have some skills to live to such an old age, and maybe he has some powerful trump cards. The reason why he could kill by surprise in this way was not because of his strong ability, but because the other party had no defense at all. After confirming that the old wizard was dead, George pretended to be panicked, quickly pushed open the closed shop door, and ran towards Diagon Alley. He did not shout in Nocturne Alley, otherwise he might have attracted some dark wizards with bad intentions before attracting the Aurors. It's bad, Mr. Morton was injured in the explosion while making potions, is there anyone who can come and save him? After George ran to Diagon Alley, he started to yell and scream in panic, as if his father had really died. Soon, 2 Aurors patrolling nearby were attracted by him. Take us there quickly. Diagon Alley and Nocturne Alley are where wizards and dark wizards gather. Aurors patrol here almost 24 hours a day to prevent any incidents from appearing in the news and affecting the reputation of the Ministry of Magic, especially the Minister. Besides, it is still the beginning of the school year, and many young wizards are brought by their parents to make large purchases. Director Scrimgeour, after testing, no magical fluctuations were found in the second wand, and no property was lost. The possibility of homicide has been ruled out. It can be confirmed that the accidental death was caused by the potion making. In Merlin's potion shop, a female wizard with pink hair, a pale heart-shaped face, and about 18 or 19 years old was reporting the results of the investigation to the middle-aged wizard standing opposite George. The middle-aged wizard nodded with satisfaction after listening. The analysis is very detailed, Tonks. It seems that Mad-Eye has taught you well this year. Follow him and learn well. In 2 years, you can become a real Auror. Although Mr. Moody has a bad temper, it is my honor to learn from him. The witch showed a little pride on her face. Although Alastair Moody had retired long ago, he was a well-known Auror in the wizarding world. More than half of the dark wizards in Azkaban were sent by him. Being able to receive guidance from such a retired Auror during the Auror preparation period made other Aurors of the same class envious. At this time, George, who was eavesdropping, turned his eyes after hearing the conversation between the two. Scrimgeour, the director of the Auror office, is Rufus Scrimgeour, who later succeeded Cornelius Fudge and became the new Minister of Magic. And Tonks, is she Nymphadora Tonks who disguised as Magus? He carefully recalled the memories of his previous life, and gradually had some impression of the identities of the two people in front of him. After Scrimgeour succeeded Cornelius Fudge as the new Minister of Magic, he took a very tough stance against Voldemort and the Death Eaters. Then he was brutally killed by Voldemort. And this Tonks was born with the ability to change her appearance at will. It seems that she married Professor Lupin in the end. Unexpectedly, she has just graduated and has not yet been promoted. From this point of view, Professor Lupin is also an old cow eating young grass. Of course, this is not important. What is important is that he knows that Scrimgeour and Tonks are both relatively responsible Aurors, which is a good thing for him now. Are Aurors necessarily good people? That's not necessarily the case. The Ministry of Magic is now full of corruption, and many Aurors are also involved. If he meets a greedy Auror, it is hard to say how much of the inheritance he can inherit in the end. What a poor child, he was adopted with great difficulty, and now he has become an orphan. Handing the investigation report to the director, Tonks turned to look at George, with sympathy in her eyes. After the investigation just now, she naturally knew the life experience of this thin boy. That's not necessarily true. Maybe it's a good thing for him. However, Scrimgeour, who heard Tonks sigh at this time, shook his head. As the director of the Auror office, he has been in the industry for so many years and knows too well what kind of wizards are in Nocturne Alley. From the boy's thin and scarred body, he had already seen the trick and guessed it. That's why he said that this is a good thing for the little boy. At least he can inherit a considerable inheritance and go to Hogwarts to study. Child, your name is Dora, right? Because Mr. Merton died unexpectedly, you are the only relative, so. Scrimgeour came to George and roughly explained the situation. There are two main points. One is that George can inherit the Dark Wizard's shop and the money saved in Gringotts. Second, the Dark Wizard died, and no one taught George magic, so he had to go to Hogwarts to learn. Both of these points were within George's expectations, and he readily agreed. During the entire investigation, he did not show too much sadness. Because it was too fake, he did not have such good acting skills to deceive Scrimgeour, who was obviously an old hand. But in the end, he still made a request. Sir, I don't want to use the name Dora anymore. Can I change it? He was not familiar with the name Dora. If possible, he would change it back to George, which sounded better. Of course, Miss Tonks will take you to handle all the inheritance procedures tomorrow. If you need, she can also help you change your name. Scrimgeour was not too surprised by George's request. He thought George might want to forget some bad memories in this way. Don't worry, leave it to me. At this time, Tonks stepped forward and pressed George's head with her hand, rubbing it gently. She was not stupid. From the conversation between the director and George, she had already sensed something. Thank you, Miss Auror. George heard this and thanked him very politely. It is not a bad thing to have the opportunity to get in touch with the Aurors, especially maybe he will need the Aurors' help in the future. Nocturne Alley is not a good place. He inherited the legacy of a dark wizard, just like a child walking on the street with a piece of gold, which will definitely make people jealous. You dare not do anything openly, but it is hard to say in secret. What a sensible child. Seeing George so sensible and polite at such a young age, Tonks immediately had a better impression of him. For adults, most of them don't hate children that much. What really makes them hate are those naughty children and their parents. If they meet an obedient and polite child, many are willing to help. Chapter 4. Signs of Prison Break. Although today's actions were a bit risky, it seems that everything is worth it now. After Scrimgeour and Tonks and several Aurors finished handling the scene and left, George lay on the comfortable bed in the Dark Wizard's bedroom and couldn't help but sigh. Not to mention the savings that the old wizard Gringotts had accumulated for most of his life, this potion shop and the potion herbs in the shop alone are a considerable fortune. Maybe these are nothing compared to the real rich people in the wizarding world, but for a little wizard, they are completely enough. It's like an adult with a fortune of 1 million, which may not be worth showing off, but if a child who has just entered junior high school has 1 million pocket money, it can definitely kill most students in the country in seconds. With this large sum of money, many things will be easier to handle. In fact, he thought about whether to sell this potion shop and live in the leaky cauldron after inheriting the inheritance for safety. But after thinking about it, he decided not to. Because he will definitely need such a private place in the future to study some magic that cannot be discovered. Moreover, this potion shop may have many uses in the future. It is easy to sell it, but it is difficult to buy it back. This child looks really thin. He needs to eat more to supplement himself in the future. Sitting up, George turned around in the bedroom, and then came to the mirror in the bedroom and took a good look at the body of this world. Since he woke up, he has been planning how to kill the old wizard reasonably. He has not taken a good look at this body. Golden hair, blue eyes, high nose bridge, facial features look pretty good, but because of long-term malnutrition, torture, the body is relatively thin. But this is not a big problem, and he can recover after taking good care of it. Fortunately, my inner self is not so weak. George bent his legs and jumped hard, and he easily jumped to a height of more than 3 meters, and reached out to touch the ceiling. This is not because he is a wizard, so he has such a strong jumping ability. The body of a wizard is indeed different from that of an ordinary person, and has the ability to resist and recover beyond ordinary people. But in terms of strength, unless he has a special bloodline like Hagrid, there is no difference from a normal muggle. The reason why George is so special is that his body not only has the mutant abilities of the Marvel World body, but also inherits the physical strength. In other words, his current strength is the sum of the strength of the 11-year-old Dora's body and the 18-year-old artificial mutant No 757's body. Although the ability of artificial mutant number 757 is not like the Beast and Wolverine, it is also the body of a normal 18-year-old adult. In addition, in the past 3 months, he has not only to train his abilities in the Marvel world, but also to train in physical fitness and close combat. His physical fitness is much stronger than that of a normal 18-year-old youth. If we use rough data to reflect, Dora's physical strength is 50 kilograms per punch, and No 757's body is 200 kilograms per punch, so now Dora and No 757's strength is both 250 kilograms. For number 757, an extra 50 kilograms is not actually obvious, but for Dora, an extra 200 kilograms of strength is a huge change. Especially since Dora's body is very light now, weighing only 50 kilograms, it is even more obvious that she can jump 3 meters away with a light jump. Her physical agility is comparable to that of cats. I am also a super kid among children. After roughly checking his body, George began to search the old wizard's bedroom. He wanted to see if he could find the old wizard's hidden banned black magic books, or notes on studying black magic, so that he could learn some powerful black magic in advance. However, the result disappointed him. He did not find any special magic books, but some normal magic books that can be bought in bookstores. In fact, think about it, the shops in Nocturne Alley are routinely inspected once a month. Even if there are any, the old wizard dare not hide them at home openly. Forget it, let this body rest first. It has been a day of tossing. Not finding anything useful, George simply washed up and lay on the old wizard's luxurious big bed, letting this body enter sleep mode. At the same time, he put his main energy back to the main body of Marvel. It was already daytime in Marvel, and it was time for daily training again. It should be soon, it seems that I have to hurry up and learn some useful magic first. After the morning training, George ate his lunch in front of him expressionlessly, but his eyes were looking at the mutant children gathered over there with his peripheral vision. When he just passed the corridor, he saw a female nurse being scolded by the supervisor here. The cause seemed to be that the female nurse specially prepared a cake, wanting to give a collective birthday to those mutant children who had never had a birthday. If he remembered correctly, not long after this happened, the female nurse suddenly realized and took the mutant children to escape from prison. Training as usual in the afternoon, after the main body fell asleep at night, his mind turned to the Harry Potter world again. It was morning here. He got up, tidied himself, made himself a hearty breakfast, and took out the daily prophet that was delivered to the door by an owl. George ate his delicious breakfast while reading the newspaper that the old wizard had subscribed to. The food at the experimental base was very nutritious, but the taste was really not to his taste. But before here, when the dark wizard was still alive, Dora could hardly even eat enough, let alone taste it. Mr. Gilderoy Lockhart, an internationally renowned figure and author, recipient of the Order of Merlin, 3rd class, honorary member of the Alliance Against Dark Arts, and 5-time winner of Wizarding Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award. The autobiography Magical Me will be signed and sold at Flourish and Blot Bookstore from 12:30 to 16:30 on August 21 St. Looking at the handsome male wizard wearing a forget-me-not blue robe on the Daily Prophet, George couldn't help but sigh. It would be great if I could come here a year earlier. At least I could still be in the same class as the Audiotech NICA. Maybe we could be directly assigned to the same college and dormitory. Yes, this is not 1991, but one Potter's second year at Hogwarts. He will enroll 1 year later than Harry Potter. Emotionally, due to his love for Harry Potter in his previous life, he naturally has a special affection for the 3rd primary school. It would be interesting if they could be assigned to the same academy to learn magic together. Rationally, he personally felt that there was no need to stay away from the 3 little ones for safety. Although these 3 little guys are very capable of causing trouble, with Dumbledore here at Hogwarts at this time, there will be basically no problems. Events that seemed dangerous were actually under Dumbledore's control. Occasionally, the trio can be used to lower Dumbledore's wariness towards him, allowing him to enter the restricted book section of the library a few more times. Chapter 5. The Magnificent Ministry of Magic. It's okay to be a younger class, anyway, learning magic is the most important thing. Putting down the newspaper in his hand, George thought while eating. He actually thought about which house he might be sorted into at the sorting ceremony. He thought it was most likely Gryffindor. Gryffindor focuses on courage, and he thinks he is quite brave. He just occupied this clone yesterday and made a plan to successfully kill an old wizard. Good morning, Dora. Oh no, I should call you your new name, George. The door of the shop was pushed open, and a young and energetic female wizard walked in. It was the female Aurora Tonks from yesterday. Good morning, Miss Tonks. Seeing this, George put down the omelette in his hand and greeted him with a smile. Tonks sat down opposite George unceremoniously and rubbed his head with her hand. Don't be so distant, just treat me as your sister in the future. George reluctantly tidied up his messed up hair, and did not refuse Tonks's closeness, but brought out the second breakfast prepared in advance from the side. I made an extra portion this morning. Let's eat together. How do you know I didn't have breakfast? What is this? It tastes great. Tonks tasted the rolled omelette on the plate and her eyes lit up immediately. The soft dough was wrapped with vegetables and sausages, which had a unique flavor. She was a terrible cook, so she never made breakfast. She usually bought something to deal with it, or simply chose not to have breakfast and eat it together at noon. Although there are various cooking magics in magic, the premise is that you have to know how to cook so that you can use cooking magic to save time and make delicious food quickly. If you don't know how to cook, even if you use cooking magic, all kinds of ingredients and kitchen utensils are flying all over the sky, and the food you make in the end will still be as bad as it should be. This is the same as various housework magics. You can only use housework magic well if you know how to do housework. This is called omelette, which is made of eggs and flour, and the vegetables wrapped inside are shredded green peppers and shredded carrots. George briefly introduced his breakfast. Of course, he didn't know whether Tonks had eaten breakfast or not, but preparing it in advance would improve her favorability regardless of whether she had eaten or not. I didn't expect your cooking skills to be so good. I think you will be sorted into Hufflepuff when you are sorted. Although he didn't understand George's introduction, Tonks still gave him a thumbs up, which made George stunned for a moment. I won't really be in Hufflepuff, will I? Then he shook his head again. If it was Hufflepuff, it didn't matter. He personally preferred Gryffindor, but in fact, no matter which college he was sorted into, he felt that there were pros and cons. But he still felt that the possibility of Hufflepuff was relatively small. Many wizards who graduated from Hufflepuff chose the catering industry after graduation, but their hallmark was not cooking, but integrity, loyalty, honesty, and fearlessness of hardship. Choosing the catering industry was probably because their dormitory was close to the kitchen, and they were influenced by it. And except for the last one, he didn't seem to have much to do with these qualities. After breakfast, under the guidance of Tonks, George began to handle various procedures for inheritance. And the first place they had to go was the famous Ministry of Magic. Hold my arm tightly, it may be a little uncomfortable for a while, but bear with it and it will pass soon. Tonks put George's hand on her arm, first carefully explained it, and then began to chant the spell. Apparition. A slight explosion sounded, and Tonks and George disappeared instantly. Nocturne Alley was not far from the Ministry of Magic, so she could apparition with George directly without wasting flu powder. No wonder not all wizards like to use apparition to travel. George felt that he instantly entered a dark place, and then the air squeezed from all directions, pressing him almost a little breathless. It felt like his chest was tightly tightened by several iron hoops, his eyeballs were squeezed back into his head, and his eardrums were pressed deep into his head. Anyway, it was very awkward and uncomfortable. But the time was very short, it felt like only 1 or 2 seconds, and he saw the light again. It will be a little uncomfortable the first time, but you will get used to it later. At this time, Tonks's giggle came to his ears. Let's go, I'll take you to register first. In this way, George was pulled to the reception desk in the center of the hall, and he looked around curiously. It's really gorgeous. After a moment, he couldn't help but sigh. The floor was a dark wooden floor that was polished to a bright shine, and the peacock blue ceiling was inlaid with glittering golden symbols, which kept moving and changing, like a huge high-altitude bulletin board. There were many gilded fireplaces embedded in the walls on both sides, and wizards in various costumes came in and out of the fireplaces. In the center of the hall was a magic fountain, with 5 statues in the fountain, one of which was a graceful wizard holding a wand, a beautiful witch, and the centaurs, goblins, and house elves surrounding them. The centaurs, goblins, and house elves all looked at the wizards and witches with infinite admiration, as if there was some special meaning. Of course, this is not the point. The point is that these 5 statues, which look 2 or 3 times bigger than real people, are actually made of pure gold. The Daily Prophet, ladies and gentlemen, have a copy of the Daily Prophet. Next to the fountain, there are wizards from the Daily Prophet selling newspapers. At 12 o'clock noon, after 4 hours, George finally completed all the procedures for inheriting the estate, and was taken back to the store by Tonks again. Strong on the outside but weak on the inside, no wonder it was so easily disintegrated by Voldemort. This is George's complaint about the Ministry of Magic. The entire Ministry of Magic looks very magnificent, but in fact, the wizards working in it are very lazy, inefficient, and very corrupt. If it weren't for Tonks, he felt that it would be quite difficult to inherit the estate completely. However, it was not without gain. At least he saw a lot of interesting things in the Ministry of Magic. Various magical items endowed with magical powers by alchemy, and various interesting small magic developed for the convenience of office, etc. It can be regarded as a gain of some knowledge. It also made him realize that although the magic in the Harry Potter world rarely has large-scale destructive power and is mostly functional magic, it does not mean that it is necessarily weak. In some aspects, it is even more dangerous and terrifying. Because many magics are very idealistic and cannot be judged solely by external destructive power. Chapter 6. Gringotts Deposit. The last step is to take you to Gringotts. Without staying in the store for long, Tonks continued to take George to Gringotts. Gringotts is the only wizarding bank in the British wizarding world, run by goblins and located on the north side of Diagon Alley. As well as saving money and keeping safe the valuables of witches and wizards, it is also possible to exchange Muggle currency for magical currency. Now that George has officially inherited the old wizard's inheritance through the Ministry of Magic, he naturally has to go to Gringotts to turn all the money saved by the old wizard into his own. How ugly! Arriving at the entrance of Gringotts and looking at the goblin guards wearing scarlet and gold uniforms, George muttered to himself. The goblins and elves in this world are not the beautiful creatures as imagined. Instead, they are very ugly, roughly similar to goblins. Following Tonks along the white steps and into the bronze door of Gringotts, a second silver door appeared in front of him, with very eye-catching words engraved on it. The general meaning is, don't have bad ideas about Gringotts' wealth, otherwise you will die miserably. 2 goblin waiters stood beside the silver door. After seeing Tonks and George, they bowed to them and then introduced them into a tall marble hall. There are about 100 goblins here who are busy, handling various business for the wizards who come in. Tonks led George to an idle goblin, took out various certificates that had just been processed at the Ministry of Magic and handed them over. Legacy changes in underground vaults. The goblins of Gringotts are not like the staff of the Ministry of Magic. They work very efficiently. They quickly checked all the certificates. After confirming that they were correct, they said to George. This is the key to the underground vault number 352. Please keep it. Do you need to go to the vault to withdraw money now? No, just tell me how many gold galleons are left in the vault. George took the key and put it in his pocket. There is also 500 gold galleons left by the old wizard in the store after his death, which is enough for him now. There are currently a total of 13,200 gold galleons left in the underground vault No. 352. The goblin looked through the account and replied. It seems that the potion business is really profitable. I only have 100 galleons per month now, and it will only be 140 galleons after I become a full-time employee. Tonks next to her couldn't help but look envious. Based on her salary, it is estimated that it will only take 10 years to have so many gold galleons. This is without expenses, otherwise she may not be able to save so much in 20 or 30 years. George, who was originally frowning, calmed down instantly after hearing Tonks' words. He originally thought that the old wizard had at least 100,000 gold galleons in savings, so he was a little disappointed when he heard that he only had more than 10,000 gold galleons. But if you think about it actually, it's normal. The old wizard opened a potion shop and did black market business, so he would definitely make money, probably more than a regular potion shop. But it definitely cost a lot to buy this potion shop. In addition, researching potions, especially high-level potions, would cost money like water, and the consumption must be very large. Now that there are more than 10,000 gold galleons left, it is reasonable. Comparing it to Tonks' salary, more than 10,000 gold galleons is already a lot, enough to squander for a long time. There are 3 types of currency for wizards: gold galleons, silver sickles, and copper nuts. 1 gold galleon is equal to 17 silver sickles, and 1 silver galleon is equal to 29 copper nuts. According to Dora's memory, a daily profits report cost only 5 copper nuts, a normal meal only cost about 2 or 3 silver sickles, and most wizards' wands cost no more than 10 gold galleons. George, Hogwarts should resend you the admission notice tomorrow morning. Study magic at Hogwarts. You will definitely make many friends there. I'm leaving first. I'll see you when I have time. At the door of Gringotts, Tonks smiled and rubbed George's head again. George's heart moved when he heard this, and then he said with a sincere invitation. Sister Tonks, without you, I would not be able to inherit the inheritance so smoothly. I want to treat you to lunch to express my gratitude. You won't refuse me, right? Tonks originally wanted to say that she wanted to go back to the Ministry of Magic, but looking at George's sincere and expectant eyes, and recalling the delicious food she had eaten in the morning, she hesitated again. Of course I won't refuse, so I'll trouble you. Anyway, it's already this time, and it's time to eat to fill our stomachs. It won't be a big deal if we return to the Ministry of Magic later. Seeing that Tonks agreed, George felt slightly relieved. He needed Tonks to appear in his shop as often as possible, so as to dissuade the dark wizards in Nocturne Alley. At the same time, he also wanted to have a good relationship with Tonks as much as possible. If Tonks could come to the shop often, then he would have the opportunity to ask Tonks to learn a few more magic spells before going to Hogwarts. This is very important to him. It is not easy to escape from the experimental base, and it is even harder to resist the subsequent pursuit after escaping. Every additional magic you learn will provide you with more protection. Especially he knew that on the main body's side, the opportunity to escape from the experimental base would not be long. Fortunately, my cooking skills are good. George planned to cook a table of delicious food next to see if he could use the delicious food to make Tonks come more frequently. As the slave of the old wizard, Dora has good cooking skills after years of training, and George himself also had some interest in food in his previous life. Although he is not as good as those professional chefs, his cooking skills are recognized by his friends around him. Combining the two, he is still somewhat confident in making food that suits his personal taste preferences. What is this dish? It tastes very special. Why have I never eaten it anywhere else before? Sweet and sour pork tenderloin. What about this? It's also delicious. Kung Pao chicken. And this? Tomato scrambled eggs. After lunch, Tonks sat in a chair, touched her bulging belly and sighed. This is the most delicious meal I have ever eaten. If Sister Tonks thinks it's delicious, you can come often when you are free. I will cook many delicious dishes. George said with a smile while cleaning up the dishes. Tonks waved her hands after hearing this. How can that be possible? I'm not that thick-skinned. In her opinion, George was already very pitiful, so how could she take advantage of him by relying on her status as an orator? That was not her style. Seeing Tonks' refusal, George probably guessed the reason, so he said seriously. Sister Tonks, don't feel embarrassed. It's actually very helpful for me that you can come here to eat often. This is Nocturne Alley. At this point, there was actually no need to beat around the bush. Tonks was not stupid. After George's reminder, she immediately reacted. In that case, okay, I'll come to you for a meal when I'm free. But I won't eat for free. I'll buy all the dishes. You're not allowed to refuse. Chapter 7, Big Shopping in Diagon Alley. At night, George's consciousness returned to Marvel's body again. It was another day of sweaty training, but nothing special happened. But his intuition told him that the jailbreak might have happened recently. Because he discovered that the mutant children had an extra comic in their hands, and the name of the comic was Uncanny X-Men. In fact, he still hasn't figured out the historical situation of this universe. There are X-Men and X-Men related comics in this universe, which shows that mutants should have been quite famous in the past. So what kind of super soldier project is there? Why is there still Captain America? All this will have to wait until he escapes from this experimental base and then looks up history to understand what is going on. Harry Potter World, early morning. When George picked up the Daily Prophet from the inbox at the door of the store, he found an extra letter. It's finally here. On the light yellow envelope, written in emerald green ink, Nocturne Alley, collected from Mr. George of Merton Potions store. Yes, this was exactly the acceptance letter sent to him by Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Although he knew that Scrimgeour and Tonks had said it, there was nothing wrong with it, but when he actually got the admission notice, he still couldn't calm down for a long time. That was Hogwarts, a real magic school, and he could go there right away to learn all kinds of magical magic. Magic, who can resist magical magic? Then let's start the big shopping. After finishing breakfast as quickly as possible, George took the list of books and equipment included in the envelope and walked out of Merton's Potions store in high spirits. But as soon as he went out, his good mood was ruined by an eyesore. Isn't this little Dora? I heard that you were readmitted to Hogwarts. Are you going to buy supplies for school? An old wizard with a hunched back and shiny hair stood at the door of the shop opposite, looking at George with a sinister look and saying hello. Good morning, Mr. Borgin, I'm just about to buy a magic book for school. Also, my name is now George. George reacted inwardly, but on the surface he still replied very politely. The identity of this old wizard is not simple. He can be said to be the oldest dark wizard in Nocturne Alley. The Borgin Bach antique store he opened is the largest magic store in Nocturne Alley. The business scope is very wide, including selling and recycling items containing black magic or other dangerous items, and providing secret valuation services for rare and ancient magical artifacts. Voldemort used to be a clerk in this black-hearted antique shop when he was young. He also relied on the complicated relationship in this antique shop to find and make 2 Horcruxes. The old wizard Borgin is the guy that George is most worried about at the moment. If this guy gives up attacking him, then no dark wizard in Nocturne Alley will be interested in the potion shop he inherited. What a good boy. I see that the Auror lady had lunch at your house yesterday. Borgin smiled, but his smile was a little oozing. And George smiled the same way, but his smile was much brighter. Yes, Sister Tonks likes my cooking skills very much. She said she would bring her colleagues and Uncle Scrimgeour over for dinner next time. That's going to be hard on you. Borgin narrowed his eyes slightly. George shook his head and said innocently. It's not hard. I like cooking very much. How about I cook more next time they come here? Mr. Borgin, can you also come and taste my cooking skills? Well, no need for that. Borgin's expression froze, and then he turned and returned to his dark shop. Seeing Borgin leave, George muttered to himself. If you dare to take advantage of me, sooner or later you will seize your shop and I will kill you, old thing. After regaining his composure, he set off again into Diagon Alley. Compared to the small and dark space of Nocturne Alley, Diagon Alley is much brighter and brighter. It is full of normal wizards and children who come to purchase and various shop assistants selling goods. Dragon liver, 16 ounces per ounce. Crucibles, copper, brass, pewter, silver crucibles, complete models, automatic stirring and foldable. Greywood owl, screech owl, grass owl, brown owl, snowy owl, we have all the pets you want. Nimbus 2001, the fastest broomstick, you deserve it. While walking around the bustling Diagon Alley, George was not reluctant to spend money, and basically bought the best tools. Although there are many bad tools, he still feels that only good tools can achieve higher efficiency. Since he has money, why save? A complete set of uniforms, cauldrons, telescopes, medicine bottles, scales, wands, just books, oh, and pets. 2 hours later, George was pushing a cart filled with various school supplies while counting the items on his list that he had not yet bought. In fact, it didn't take much time to buy other things. Even the wands were purchased quickly. I tried a few and found the one that worked best for me, so I bought them. Mainly because in the process of buying uniforms, I needed to take measurements, which delayed me some time. Hey, the owl store is just right. Let's buy an owl. Seeing the owl shop on the street, George thought for a moment, then pushed the cart and walked in. There are many pets for the little wizard to choose from, but he feels that the most useful one is the owl, because the owls in the wizarding world are different from ordinary owls. The magic owl in the wizarding world is not only smarter, but also has its own positioning magic. It can find the recipient no matter where he is, unless the recipient uses relevant shielding magic. In addition to delivering letters, it can also deliver various things, and its strength is far beyond that of normal owls. It can deliver things weighing 10 to 20 kilograms. He is a pragmatist. Since he wants to buy a pet, he must buy a useful one, otherwise it is better not to buy it. He does not have the energy to keep a pet. Welcome to Ella Owl Shop, sir, what kind of owl do you want? Seeing George enter the door, a clerk quickly came up. That one. He quickly found the owl he liked after scanning the entire store. And following George's finger, the clerk's eyes suddenly showed a look of surprise. Are you sure you want that one? Sure. George nodded affirmatively. The clerk hesitated for a moment and explained. I need to remind you that it is 10 times more expensive than a normal owl, and it costs 100 gold galleons. The owl George was referring to was not an ordinary owl, but a large eagle owl that was nearly 1 meter tall when standing. Normally, only adult wizards with special hobbies or for research would spend money to buy such a large owl. He had never seen a young wizard buy this as a pet. On the one hand, it is too expensive, and on the other hand, even if the parents are rich, they are still worried. Such a large owl is not safe. Chapter 8. Magic is not easy. Is it enough? George took out a bulging cloth bag with more than 400 gold galleons in it. He chose such a large owl for 2 main reasons. First, an owl of this size already has good attack capabilities. If he is really in danger, he can provide him with considerable help. The second is to value its flying ability. A normal magical owl can fly with something weighing more than 10 kilograms. So for such a big owl, it should not be a problem to carry something weighing more than 100 kilograms. If you encounter trouble in the future and cannot defeat it, you can also let the owl fly away with you. Not only is it a pet, but it can also be used as a flying mount. You don't have to choose who it is. Since you are sure, of course there is no problem. When the clerk saw that George was really rich and not joking, he immediately enthusiastically helped George move the eagle owl to the cart, fearing that George would regret it. This owl eats a lot every day, and it will lose money if no wizard comes to buy it. After buying the pet, George went to the last and most important store, Flourish and Blot's bookstore. Today he not only wanted to buy all the textbooks for the first grade, but also many other magic books, especially those about gesture casting. Because if he cannot learn to use hand gestures to cast spells, then his body in the Marvel world will not be able to display his magical abilities normally until he makes a wand. Today is August 3rd, and there are still 18 days before Gilderoy Lockhart's book signing at Flourish and Blot bookstore, so there are not too many people in the bookstore, and finding books is relatively simple. Just ask the clerk directly. Gesture casting? That kind of book is no longer sold. Now that everyone uses wands, who will learn that backward method of casting spells? The clerk shook his head. George did not give up, but continued. I'm very interested in that backward way of casting spells. I wonder if you can help me find a way to find one? I can add money. To show his sincerity, he first took out 20 gold galleons. The clerk hesitated when he saw this, and finally stretched out 4 fingers. It needs to be purchased separately, and the cost is very high, 40 pieces. No problem. George directly took out 40 gold galleons and placed them on the table. He knew that the price must be a rip-off, but as long as he could get the magic book related to gesture casting, he could pay for 400 or 400 pieces, not to mention 40. 3 days, the goods will arrive within 3 days. Upon seeing this, the clerk immediately accepted the 40 gold galleons with a smile. I'll pick it up in 3 days. After shopping around again, and after paying the clearly marked gold galleons, George pushed the full trolley, hummed an unknown tune, and began to return to the drugstore in Nocturne Alley, preparing to teach himself magic. On the way back, we also attracted a lot of curious eyes because of the huge and eye-catching eagle owl. Be obedient and don't bark. When he arrived at the store, he placed the eagle owl on the table in the bedroom, took out the hare bought at the owl shop and fed it to one. George gave instructions and began to sort out the magic book he had just bought. After hearing what George said, the eagle owl actually nodded very meekly. For ordinary little wizards, the eagle owl is too big to handle and dangerous, making it unsuitable as a pet. But it was different for George. His body is stronger than that of a normal adult. Even though the eagle owl is big, it can't defeat him. As for the danger, the psychic ability he inherited from Professor. Not only can it easily communicate with animals, but it can also influence the behavior of animals to a certain extent. Sometimes George thinks that if he spends time studying magical beasts, he will probably be no worse than Newt and Hagrid in the future and become a master of magical beasts. Standard spells, elementary and magic theory, study these 2 books first. He pulled out the 2 most important books from a pile of magic books and began to study them with concentration. Nowadays, the most important thing is to master practical spells. As for the history of magic, herbal medicine, potions and other subjects, we can put them aside for the time being until the crisis of Marvel itself is over. This research lasted until evening. Sure enough, it's not that simple. Putting down the magic book and rubbing his dry eyes, George picked up the bread he bought while shopping in Diagon Alley and ate it. When watching the movie, it seemed as if a wizard could perform magic by waving a wand, as if it was very simple. But in fact, when I actually learned it, I found that it was not that easy to successfully release a magic spell. This is the same as cooking. It looked like there were only a few steps, but in fact when it was my turn, I was blinded. Even if the steps are the same, the taste is different. According to the magic book, if you want to successfully cast a spell, you must first have the blood of a wizard and have magic power. Otherwise, even if all the subsequent steps are okay, it will still be in vain. The second is the spell. The spell must be pronounced clearly. Different spells have different speech speeds, emotions, and other aspects. If the standard is not met, either the magic effect will be greatly weakened, or it will have no effect at all. There are also very few that may produce some unexpected effects. Finally, there is the action of waving the wand. The wand is not waved randomly, and the trajectories of different spells are also different when waved. Of course, these are all for beginners. If you really understand and master a spell, and even its fundamental principles and laws have been studied very deeply, it is not difficult to perform this magic without a wand and silently. A truly top wizard can cast most magic instantly without a wand and silently. Softening spell, cutting spell, unlocking spell, floating spell, locking spell, and repairing spell. Focus on learning the unlocking spell first. After eating bread, George turned to the page of Standard Spells, Elementary that explains the unlocking spell. The spells in the first grade textbook are the most basic and easiest to learn spells, and they are basically not powerful. For example, even if he learned the cutting spell, at his level, he could only cut a napkin or something, and he probably couldn't even cut a person's skin. Instead of doing this, it is better to learn the unlocking spell first, so that the self in the main world of Marvel can open the mutant ability inhibitor tied around his neck and exert his own abilities. You can also open various high-tech doors in the laboratory and escape smoothly. If there is extra time, it won't be too late to learn some other spells. In fact, he thinks that the transfiguration spell should be more useful than the unlocking spell, especially for high-tech weapons. As long as one of the parts can be destroyed, it can be disabled. But after thinking about it carefully, he gave up. The transfiguration spell is a separate category to learn. The difficulty of learning is definitely much more difficult than other spells. Even a genius like Hermione couldn't learn it before school started. He didn't think he could learn it in a short time without guidance. Even if he really learned it, the effect would probably not be so obvious. There was no need to take the risk. Chapter 9. Hello, Harry. 3 days later, George successfully got a guide to gesture casting from the clerk of Flourish and Blots. 10 days later, George stood in the yard, waved his wand at a locked box and chanted, "Allaho, open!" A blue magic beam shot out from the top of the wand and hit the box accurately. Most magic spells are accompanied by beams of different colors when they are activated, especially offensive and directional magic, such as the unlocking spell, the disarming spell, and the killing spell. But some magic spells are silent and there are no obvious signs when they are activated, such as the flying spell, the repairing spell, and the levitation spell. Click! A crisp sound came from the lock, and the lock buckle automatically popped open. Finally succeeded. Seeing this, George showed a satisfied smile on his face. After 10 days of sleepless research, plus occasionally asking Tonks who came to eat for free, he was finally able to successfully release the unlocking spell. And through these days of study, he also knew that he was not a so-called magic genius. A true genius is like Hermione, who has never been exposed to magic and has no one to guide her. While learning the history and common sense of the magic world, she also took time to learn spells, and easily mastered several kinds of magic before school started. Even more talented people like Snape can create powerful spells during school. As for Dumbledore, Grindelwald, and Voldemort, they can no longer be described as geniuses. Fortunately, he also has his own methods. He said he studied for 10 days, but in fact he studied for 20 days. Because when his body couldn't hold on and needed to rest, the main body in the Marvel world took over again. The most important thing in learning magic is talent, followed by diligence. His talent is not enough, so he makes up for it with diligence. The main body is in the experimental base, and there is nothing else to do except training. There is a lot of free time. He can find a stick similar to a wand to practice the feeling. Through continuous practice and perception, he can speed up the learning of spells. Just be careful to avoid or turn your back to the surveillance and don't be discovered. Even if you are discovered, it doesn't matter, because no one in this world knows what he is doing anyway. Once the original body is free in the future, he will learn magic faster, because he has twice as much time as others to learn and study magic. In fact, if it is not considered cheating, it is considered a genius among wizards to be able to learn a spell in 10 days. You should know that most young wizards can't master much magic in a year, and the poor ones can only master a few. The next step is to practice gesture casting continuously until the gesture casting is successful, and then you can consider the next spell. After several consecutive experiments, George was sure that he had fully mastered the unlocking spell. He immediately threw away the wand and began to practice the unlocking spell according to the instructions of the Guide to Gesture Casting. After another 8 days, through the uninterrupted practice of the original body and the clone, he finally successfully released the unlocking spell without a wand. However, compared to the 1 or 2 seconds it takes to cast the unlocking spell with a wand, it takes about 7 or 8 seconds to cast a spell with gestures instead of a wand. Even if you are proficient, it will probably take 5 or 6 seconds. If 2 wizards duel, 5 or 6 seconds is enough for the other wizard to use his wand to release 3 or 4 attack spells. No wonder this way of casting spells will be eliminated. August 21st, today is the day when Lockhart signs and sells books at Flourish and Blots. In the morning, George looked at the date on the magic calendar while eating breakfast, and slowly calculated in his mind. He naturally had no interest in the big liar Lockhart, but if I remember correctly, today was also the day when Harry Potter followed the Weasley family to Diagon Alley to purchase school supplies. After completing his first grade studies, Harry returned to his aunt and uncle's house who hated him during the summer vacation. Because of the house elf Dobby, he was locked up by his uncle and was not allowed to go to Hogwarts. It was his good friends Ron and the Weasley brothers who secretly drove their father's magic car and took him back to the burrow to live. Then let's get in touch with them first. In the end, he still felt that he could take the initiative to get in touch with them. Compared to Voldemort, who would be resurrected in a few years, he felt that he would gain more from being with Harry and the others now. Many places and many things in Hogwarts, if he wanted to get in touch with them, were basically out of reach, but with Harry and the others, there would be no problem. For example, the restricted area in the Hogwarts library, where he wanted to secretly read the magic books, was basically impossible. But if he was with Harry, Dumbledore would turn a blind eye, and the same was true for the room of requirement. So, after breakfast, George did not continue to study spells as usual today, but stood at the window of the pharmacy hall and observed outside. About an hour later, he saw a father and son with blonde hair, walking elegantly into the Borgian blog shop opposite. That should be the Malfoys. It seems that Harry Potter is already in the store. They dared to bring the children into Nocturne Alley at this time. In addition, their expensive wizard robes and the temperament of a superior made it easy to judge their identities. Sure enough, about 10 minutes later, shortly after the father and son left the Borgian blog store, a thin boy wearing glasses and covered in grey ran out of the store in a hurry. Where is this? Harry stood in a small, dark alley, looking at the shops that seemed to be full of dark magic, and felt a little creepy. Some shrunken human heads were gloomily displayed in the window of the shop next door. In front of the shop 2 doors away, a large cage was filled with huge black spiders. He turned to look at a dark doorway on the right, where 2 wizards in ragged clothes were looking at him and whispering. "I want to get out of here quickly, I hope I can get out." Today he used flu powder for the first time, but he didn't know what went wrong. Instead of going to Diagon Alley, he came to a scary and strange store, and accidentally saw the illegal transactions of Malfoy and his son. "Are you lost?" Just as he was fearfully preparing to avoid the dark doorway and groping in another direction, a calm but slightly childish voice suddenly sounded behind him. Turning around, he saw a boy who was as thin as him but with a very determined look, standing behind him holding a magic book. "This is Nocturne Alley, a place where dark wizards gather. It's not safe if you are alone here." "Hello, my name is Harry. I came here accidentally because of flu fans. What I want to go to is Diagon Alley." Perhaps feeling the kindness from the little boy, Harry hurriedly explained. George also smiled when he heard this. "Hello, Harry, my name is George, you probably read Diagon Alley as Nocturne Alley. But it doesn't matter, they are connected together, I will send you out." Chapter 10. Hermione and Hagrid. "George, thank you for sending me out." After walking out of the gloomy Nocturne Alley and arriving at the bustling Diagon Alley, Harry finally breathed a sigh of relief and immediately thanked George. He felt that if George hadn't sent him out just now, the weird wizards along the way might have eaten him. "Harry! Harry!" Just then, a little girl with thick, fluffy brown hair ran towards us from the street. "I'm so happy to see you. Why are you covered in grey and wearing glasses?" "Nice to see you too, Hermione." Harry adjusted his cracked glasses with a happy smile on his face. "It was an accident." "Okay, let me fix it for you first. It will be as good as before." Hermione drew her wand and cast a repairing charm on Harry's glasses. As if time had gone back, the glasses, which were already full of cracks, returned to a brand new state in just a few seconds. "Looks like I have to practice this spell too." Harry looked at his brand new glasses and couldn't help but let out a sigh. He was not Hermione. Not only had he learned all the spells in the first grade textbook, but he had also taught himself many spells. He had not even fully mastered the basic spells, including the restoration charm. Like Harry, George had the same idea at this time. The repairing spell can not only repair small things like glasses. If you practice it well, you can easily repair collapsed buildings. In the future, in the main Marvel world, he can make a lot of money just by relying on this magic. "Who are you?" After helping Harry repair his glasses, Hermione turned to look at George standing next to Harry, with a puzzled look on her face. "He's a friend I just met, George, and this is Hermione Granger." Harry quickly introduced the two of them. George also stretched out his hand and smiled. "Hello, beautiful Miss Granger." "Hello, George." Hearing George complimenting her on her beauty, Hermione's favorable impression of George suddenly grew a lot, and she happily stretched out her hand to hold George's hand. Apart from her parents, this was the first time anyone praised her for her beauty, and quite a few praised her for being smart. "Harry, since your friends are here, it's time for me to go back. See you at Hogwarts." After shaking hands with Hermione, George didn't stop much, waved and walked into Nocturne Alley. "It's the first time you meet, just get to know him. There's no need to be too harsh, it would seem too deliberate. Besides, his time is precious and he still needs to continue studying and learning magic." The most important thing was that he had no intention of stopping Malfoy from secretly giving Ginny Voldemort's diary. Voldemort's diary contains Voldemort's soul, which can confuse people's hearts. Even if he has psychic abilities, he has no chance of resisting it, so he doesn't intend to touch it and keep it as his own. There is no need to try to stop it. After all, with Dumbledore here, it will only become a test for Harry in the end, and no little wizard will be really hurt. He also wanted to use this matter to see if he could gain some benefits. He looks pretty nice. Why haven't I seen him in school before? Hermione looked at George's leaving figure with some confusion in her tone. George seemed to be no older than her. He was either in the same grade or one grade above her. She shouldn't have seen him before. Harry heard this and smiled. Because he only went to Hogwarts for his first year this year, of course you haven't seen him. It turns out he is younger than us, so how did you meet him? Hermione asked curiously as she led Harry towards Flourish and Blott's bookstore. And Harry also talked about what he had just experienced. On the other side, when George returned to the door of his shop, he unexpectedly saw a very burly figure standing at the door of his shop and looking around. To say he is tall is not enough to describe him, because his height has exceeded the limit of normal humans. After a rough visual inspection, it was estimated that it was about 3.5 meters tall. He might not be able to touch the person's waist even if he approached and stretched out his hand. It felt very oppressive. Why is this guy in front of my store? With such a body shape and dress, George could guess his identity at a glance. It is Rubeus Hagrid, who has both wizard and giant blood, the keykeeper of Hogwarts, the gamekeeper and the master of magical animals. Thinking of Hagrid's life experience, he couldn't help but give a thumbs up to Hagrid's father, Mr. Hagrid. He was really a fierce man. You must know that the height of the normal giant family is about 7 or 8 meters, but Mr. Hagrid, as a male wizard of normal height, can actually combine with female giants and reproduce offspring. People have to admire his amazing specialties. Sir, what can I do for you? George stepped forward and asked. Hagrid turned around and looked down at George, and found that he was a thin little wizard. He immediately replied in a gentle tone. I'm looking for a medicine to get rid of flesh-eating slugs. I heard that this potion shop is the only one that has it. Unfortunately, it seems to be closed. Although his voice was gentle, due to his huge size, to George's ears, it was similar to the sound of an ordinary person yelling. Mr. Merlin, the owner of this potion shop, passed away due to an accident while refining potions some time ago. Now I am taking over. I know the potion you mentioned and can find it for you. George took out the key and opened the door, then quickly went to the counter and took out a bottle of magic potion. Although Dora does not know how to refine potions, because she has to introduce and attract customers, she knows everything about herbalism and the functions of all the potions in the store. The repellent agent is very effective against carnivorous slugs, cabbage caterpillars and cabbage heartworms. Oh, thank you, little boss. Hagrid took the potion somewhat unexpectedly, and a satisfied smile suddenly appeared on his face. How much? Chinjui, she's Hiko. George smiled and held out his hand. It's much cheaper than I expected. Hagrid took a handful of silver sickles out of the pocket of his huge moleskin coat, counted 14 of them, and placed them in George's hand. He thought that this rare potion would cost at least 2 gold galleons. Because I'm going to Hogwarts soon and I'm in a good mood, so I'll give you half price. George put 14 silver coins into the box on the counter and said deliberately happily. Since he can communicate with animals using his psychic abilities and has the potential to become a master of magical animals, he cannot let it go to waste. Build a good relationship with Hagrid and learn more about magical animals. Whether it is to make money or raise some magical animals to increase your strength, it is a good choice. So after recognizing Hagrid, he started thinking about making friends. Hagrid is enthusiastic, kind, and straightforward. He doesn't have so many ill intentions. It's not difficult to build a good relationship with him. Sure enough, after hearing his words, Hagrid was obviously stunned for a moment, and his attitude instantly became much closer. He looked at George's face carefully and smiled. It turns out you are the new student this year. I am Rubeus Hagrid, the gamekeeper of Hogwarts. You can come to me when you are free after school, and I will make rock biscuits for you. Chapter 11, Counterattack, Escape from the Base. 5 days later, the Institute for Genetic Modification in Mexico City. Xander Rice looked at the young version of Wolverine X-24 he had copied using Wolverine genes in front of him, and couldn't help laughing. Finally, I finally succeeded in my research. A Wolverine that completely obeys my orders. The world in the future will surrender under my feet. His father, Dale Rice, was one of the scientists who performed the adamantium transplant for Logan, but was killed when Logan escaped from the laboratory. From that moment on, he was determined to kill all uncontrolled and dangerous mutants and create mutant soldiers who would obey his orders. Later, he established Yockley Gene Company and used the food and beverage companies he controlled to disseminate the M43 virus they developed to the public on a large scale. This virus will not affect humans, but it will curb the abilities of existing mutants and eliminate genetic mutations in future generations of humans. After more than 20 years of hard work, there will finally be no new mutants born in this world. Donald, since those experimental subjects are unwilling to obey orders, let's deal with them all. Turning around, Dr. Rice gave instructions with cold eyes to a man whose right hand was completely replaced by a robotic arm. His original plan was to use the mutant genes collected early on to breed a new batch of mutant children through surrogate mothers in Mexico, and then sell them as weapons to other organizations. However, after this period of experiments, it was discovered that after these children grew up, they actually had their own thoughts, which they could not completely control and even tried to escape. So now that he has developed mutant clones that are completely under his control, he naturally doesn't need those failed products. And he felt that maybe not just selling weapons, as long as he could stabilize a large number of cloned mutants who obeyed his orders, then he could completely rule the entire world. Do you want to deal with that number 757 as well? Donald was not surprised by Dr. Rice's proposal. Dr. Rice hesitated for 2 seconds and then nodded. Dispose of it. Now that the replication technology is mature, in addition to replicating Wolverine in large quantities, you may also be able to replicate Professor X and Magneto. There is no need to waste resources on inferior experimental products. Learn. Donald pulled out the pistol from his waist, turned around and left the experimental base. On the other side, George, who was practicing hand gestures and casting spells in his room, looked at the clock hanging on the wall, and his face gradually became serious. No, is it about to start? Normally at this time, someone should have come to take him to training. It looks like it's started. At this time, the door to his room was suddenly opened, and 2 familiar figures walked in. The leader was the instructor who had been training him during this period. I just said this guy is a waste. Training for so long is just a waste of my time. It's not time to deal with it now. After the instructor came in, he glanced at George with disgust, and then ordered to the men behind him holding submachine guns. Deal with it, and then throw the body into the laboratory's crematorium, where it will be burned together with the small batch of garbage. Yes, Captain. The subordinate raised the submachine gun in his hand, aimed at George and pulled the bolt. But just when he was about to pull the trigger, he heard experimental subject number 757 suddenly say something incomprehensible. Open the Ilaho hole. With a pop sound, the ability suppressor on experimental subject No. 757's neck automatically detached. Immediately afterwards, he felt a chill on his neck, and his consciousness gradually became blurred. It turned out that George started to cast spells as soon as he saw the 2 people appear. However, because the spell casting movements were very small, the 2 people on the opposite side did not take it seriously. The ability suppressor was released, and the magnetic control fully exploded. The dagger he had placed at the door in advance flew up instantly and directly wiped the guard's neck, temporarily eliminating the crisis. Stab it. The instructor pulled out the dagger from his waist and deflected the dagger from behind, and cold sweat suddenly broke out on his forehead. How so? If he hadn't reacted in time just now, he would have followed the same path as his subordinates. The moment he saw the ability suppressor of experimental subject number 757 falling off, he, who had been wandering on the edge of life and death all year round, immediately became alert and immediately pulled out the dagger from his waist. But if experimental subject number 757 attacks him first, then he probably won't have time to react. Have you hidden your abilities and strength? In his impression, experimental subject No. 757's speed and strength in controlling the dagger were not strong, and he could usually deflect it easily. But just now, although he successfully deflected the dagger, his wrist still hurt slightly due to the strong force on the dagger. Dead people don't need to know that much. George controlled the dagger to swipe to destroy the surveillance in the room, and then attacked like a violent storm towards the instructor who could usually defeat him easily. He does have hidden strength in normal times, but he won't be as strong as he is now. The main reason is that the shared wizard blood has an unexpected bonus to his mutant abilities. Because the speed of the dagger was too fast, the angle was too tricky, and the power was very impressive, the instructor was already impressed after just a few rounds. He wanted to escape, wanted to fight George in close combat, but George didn't give him any chance at all, so he could only defend as much as possible, hoping that his companions would find the abnormality here and come to rescue him. However, George knew that the time for escape was precious, so how could he waste time here? Gun. He controlled the dagger attack while hooking his hand at the dead guard over there, and the submachine gun in the guard's hand immediately flew into his hand. Instructor. Goodbye. Aiming the submachine gun at the instructor who was still trying to resist the dagger, George pulled the trigger without hesitation. He was not a rigid person. He had a gun but didn't use it. He had to use it. Da-da-da-da-da. Oh, God! The instructor widened his eyes in horror when he saw this, and was shot into a sieve before he could finish his words. George waved his hand to retrieve his dagger, and took back the instructor's dagger as well. He took the submachine gun, walked out of the room where he was imprisoned, and sneaked out of the laboratory. He controlled the dagger to destroy all the surveillance that might discover him along the way, as well as the guards he met. Soon he heard fierce gunshots and screams. It was obvious that this time it was not just him who had to be dealt with, but all the mutant children. Perhaps it was because of this that no guards came in time when there was a problem on his side. Compared to him, the mutant children caused more chaos. This is also the reason why he has not been in a hurry to escape, but has to wait until today to escape. If he escaped alone, in this experimental base full of surveillance, he would probably be surrounded by a large number of guards after walking a few steps. Facing a large number of guns, he is not Magneto, and he can't stop it at all. Chapter 12, Choice, to save or not to save. Call out. Controlling two daggers and wiping off the necks of two guards in a sneak attack, George came to a fork in the road. According to what he had learned and overheard secretly during this period, the right side of the forked road was the canteen, and beyond the canteen was the room where the mutant children were kept, and the left side was the road leading outside the laboratory. If he walked to the left at this time, with his current strength, he would most likely be able to sneak out safely and get a car to escape. Once you drive to a crowded urban area, the sky is high and the birds can fly. With those mutant children attracting firepower, there probably won't be many people chasing him later. Ah! Just as he was about to step towards the left side of the forked road, a miserable cry sounded from the depths of the right forked road. It was an immature voice, the voice of a child. And this scream also made George lower his raised foot again. It has nothing to do with me. I have no relatives or friends. There is no need to take risks for people I don't know. They can escape in the end anyway. After hesitating for a moment, he raised his foot again and prepared to step to the left. Ah! Another scream sounded. It was another child. There were a total of 50 mutant children in the entire experimental base, and according to what he saw in the movie, only less than 20 escaped in the end, including X-24 little wolf girl. In other words, more than 30 mutant children died in this escape. Although they are just children now, if they grow up in the future, they will be good fighting forces. If they can be recruited, they will have an extra layer of protection in this dangerous Marvel world. Besides, wealth can be gained through risk, and for the sake of the future, it is worth taking some risks now. If it's really too dangerous, it's not too late to run away then. As soon as his thoughts changed, George moved his foot that was originally going to be on the left side to the right side. In fact, at this moment, he didn't know in his heart whether his current choice was really because of the reason he just thought of, or simply because of the lives of the more than 20 children. People are like this sometimes. No one knows what choice they will make when the time comes. Some people think they are selfish, but at critical moments they choose to sacrifice themselves to save others. And some people talk about benevolence, justice, and morality, but in the end they choose to be the first to escape. George thinks he is not a good person, but he is not a bad person either. He is a normal person whose moral level is at the average level of human beings. If he were asked to sacrifice himself to save others, he wouldn't be able to do it, but if he could risk saving others, especially a group of children, without sacrificing himself, then he thought maybe he could give it a try. Lady, Will, Ellie. In the cafeteria, Gabriella looked at the 3 children who were shot dead for stopping the pursuers, and tears flowed from her eyes again. After understanding that the purpose of this genetic modification research institute was not to research specific drugs to cure cancer, but to cultivate mutant killers, she and several equally kind-hearted colleagues decided to secretly escape with these poor children. But before the plan could be implemented, the senior management of the laboratory had already decided to execute these children collectively. For this reason, they had to escape early, but even though the children had various magical abilities, they were no match for the experienced guards holding cold firearms. Just by escaping to the cafeteria, several of her colleagues had been killed for covering up the situation, and more than a dozen of the 50 children had been killed. If she wanted to actually escape later, it was estimated that more people would die. Lola. At this time, seeing X-23, the strongest among the children, after killing 6 people in a row, his limbs were also caught and fixed in mid-air, unable to break free. Gabriella pulled out the body of the guard next to her, with a submachine gun, and said to the children behind him, "You go to the door and Aunt Isa will take you to your destination." Isa is the last colleague alive. She is usually responsible for driving a large truck to transport daily supplies purchased from the city to the base. After receiving their notification, they had already driven their car to the door to pick them up. "What about you and Laura?" The slightly older mutant boy in the lead had a worried look on his face. Although they have been living in a laboratory and have no common sense, they are not stupid. "Rico, you are the oldest among them. I will leave them all to you. Take them to their destination and wait for me there. I will definitely take Laura to find you," Gabriella told the boy in a gentle tone, then held a submachine gun and fired wildly at the opposite side, intending to create an opportunity for the children to escape. Her shooting skills were not good, but this burst of random shooting also caused the guards who were controlling the little wolf girl to panic, causing one of the little wolf girl's feet to break free, and fiercely used the adamantium alloy wolf claw on that foot. Inserted into a guard's eye, temporarily freed from restraints. However, it was obvious that more guards had arrived on the other side of the passage. Rikudo gritted his teeth when he saw this, and ran towards the back corridor with his unrelated brothers and sisters. Not long after escaping from the canteen, he was stopped by 4 guards with firearms in the passage. "Everyone come together." They were scared inside, but they still mustered up the courage and planned to fight to the death with the 4 guards and escape from here. Whoosh! Whoosh! However, before their abilities were activated, 2 of the guards suddenly fell to the ground with blood gushing out of their necks. The remaining 2 guards turned around in a hurry, but were greeted by 2 bullets. "Are you all right?" George dealt with 4 guards, and looked at the stunned children in front of him, and he was slightly relieved. There were still 34 children alive in front of him, and he came in time. No 757. When Rikdu found that the one who saved them was the mutant number 757 who never spoke, he was also stunned for a moment, but then he immediately said anxiously, "Aunt Gabriella and Laura are still in the cafeteria. I have cleared all the guards behind, you continue to escape, I will save them." George did not hesitate, and after giving instructions, he threw away the submachine gun in his hand, replaced it with the 2 guns of the guards on the ground, and rushed to the cafeteria. So cruel. As soon as he rushed into the cafeteria, he saw the little wolf girl riding on the neck of a guard, firing at his head, and his brains were dried out. That posture frightened the besieging guards. However, he was too thin after all, and was suppressed by the guards who reacted with bullets. Although he could not be killed because of his self-healing ability, he was still shot down from the air and retreated repeatedly. Gabriella, who was next to him, had used up all her bullets and was suppressed behind the bunker, so she could not help at all. "It's time to show your real skills." At this moment, it was obviously not enough to just control the dagger to kill the enemy. He did not have the self-healing ability to be fearless of so many guns on the other side. If he could not kill the opponent at the fastest speed, what awaited him was ruthless firepower coverage. So George set up 2 submachine guns, attached all the control of magnetic force to the bullets in the magazine, and began to output crazily. After the bullets were fired, they did not fly according to the original trajectory, but were affected by the magnetic force and turned into arcs, accurately hitting the eyebrows of all the guards. The shooting speed of the submachine gun and the accuracy of the sniper rifle were the trump cards that really dared to come to help. Chapter 13. Ever since he knew that his mutant limit was only level 2, he has been thinking about how to use his abilities to the maximum extent. He couldn't make countless bullets or even missiles stop and rebound like Magneto, nor could he lift thousands of tons of things, or use magnetism to fly and change the Earth's magnetic field. However, he felt that the way the instructor at the experimental base trained him to control a dagger to kill people was too low. It's better to use a needle than a dagger, at least the number and speed of control will be much faster. Although the power is smaller, it should not be bad to attack the vital points such as the 7 orifices. Of course, after thinking hard, he thought that if he wanted to maximize the power of magnetism, he still had to use firearms. The bullets fired by firearms, whether in speed or damage, are much stronger than any sharp weapon he controls. He only needs to slightly affect the trajectory of the bullet to become a sharpshooter beyond the limit of human beings. It's still a submachine gun now. If he becomes more powerful in the future and can control the trajectory of the bullets of heavy machine guns, that would be amazing. He can deal with all the guards of the entire base by himself. Let's go. After firing most of the 2 magazines, all the guards in the cafeteria had already fallen to the ground. George waved to the stunned Gabriella and the confused little wolf girl. Lola, let's go. Gabriella came to her senses and hurried forward to pull the little wolf girl towards George. She knew the experimental subject number 757, of course, but unlike other mutant children, this directly generated adult mutant did not need to be taken care of by nurses like them, but was taken care of by special personnel. But since the other party was willing to help, they were definitely not enemies. Running all the way with Gabriella and the little wolf girl, they soon caught up with the children in front, but George did not dare to be careless, because he knew that the guards of this experimental base were far more than that. It's just that the other party did not expect the current situation to happen, and they have not fully reacted for a while. And it is not ruled out that the other party has some more lethal and advanced weapons. Don't look at how ruthless he was just now. He killed a group of guards in the blink of an eye with 2 submachine guns. That was mainly because the little wolf girl attracted the firepower and launched a sneak attack. To be honest, in his current situation, it would be a big problem if he encountered a sniper. Some special Barrett heavy sniper rifles, with high penetration bullets, can penetrate thick concrete walls with one shot. If he is sniped from a long distance, his magnetic force cannot be deflected at all, and he may be killed before he can even react. So now is not the time to slack off. Fortunately, there were no accidents on the way back. He did not encounter the sniper he was worried about, nor the clone of Wolverine, and successfully arrived outside the experimental base. Do you know where the most important laboratory and data room of this base are? After carrying the children to the truck compartment, George did not get on the car immediately, but asked Gabriella. Although Gabriella was a little confused, she quickly pointed out 2 directions. There and there. Very good, let's give them some gifts before we leave. George opened the bag on his back and took out a dozen grenades collected from the bodies of the guards. In fact, there were not only grenades, but also some cash in his bag, so that he would not be penniless after leaving. I hope you like it. Using his ability to control the grenades, he accurately shot them at the 2 locations pointed by Gabriella, and then pulled the fuses at the same time in mid-air. A moment later, a violent explosion sounded, and the 2 locations of the experimental base instantly turned into a sea of fire. Let's go. Seeing that the goal was achieved, George got into the car with Gabriella, who opened her mouth wide. The purpose of his doing this was very simple. If he could kill the senior executives of the experimental base, it would be the best. If not, he could also create chaos, destroy those important research materials, and slow down the opponent's pursuit. And his goal was indeed achieved. An hour later, Dr. Rice, who was covered in dust, slapped Commander Donald in the face and yelled angrily. Waste, I asked you to deal with those garbage, but it turned out like this. Most of the people escaped, and so many of my important data were destroyed. If X-24 hadn't been fine, I would have thrown you into the crematorium right now. Boss, it was my mistake. I didn't expect those nurses to help them escape. Donald didn't care about the pain on his face at all, but just bowed his head respectfully. Dr. Rice took a deep breath, calmed down and ordered. Things have already happened. I don't want to hear your explanation. I want you to catch those escaped mutant children as quickly as possible and deal with them. Don't let them be discovered by other organizations. As one of the world's famous companies, he has secret connections with many terrorist organizations. He understands that this world is not simple, especially with the existence of a behemoth called S.H.I.E.L.D. If S.H.I.E.L.D. finds out that there are still mutants, they will definitely find him based on the clues of the mutants, and then it will be troublesome. Before a large number of mutants are cloned, he doesn't want to go against S.H.I.E.L.D. Report to me anytime if there is anything later. I will bring X-24 to help when necessary, and I can also test the actual combat effect of X-24. Yes, boss. Donald nodded, left the half-exploded laboratory, and went to gather his men. What were the results of the investigation? Commander, according to the results of our investigation, it seems that it was caused by experimental subject number 757. According to... A captain quickly stated the results of the investigation. Donald frowned after hearing this. It's him, a mere second-level mutant. How can he have such strength? He had been directing the previous battles, so he naturally knew what was going on. Although the mutant children escaped control with the help of several nurses, he quickly mobilized people to help stabilize the situation. If nothing else happened, he should have been able to block all the escaping mutant children in the cafeteria. But for some reason, after a burst of gunfire, his men became silent. He was preparing to pursue with more men, but was frightened by the explosion and rushed back immediately. There was no way around it. There was an explosion location near the big boss's laboratory. He didn't dare not go back. It shouldn't be wrong. Captain Biss, who was responsible for solving experimental subject number 757, was killed. Although he destroyed all the surveillance along the way, our trace analysis experts still found the traces he left to the canteen. However, from the analysis of the corpses that were killed, except for a few who died from daggers, most of them were gunshot wounds. Basically, they were fatally shot. The squad leader explained. A sharpshooter, but he doesn't seem to have the ability in this area. Donald frowned, showing a puzzled look. Mutants with the potential to be sharpshooters generally either have supervision or special motion capture abilities, reaction abilities, etc. As far as he knows, experimental subject number 757 has psychic abilities and magnet control. Maybe you should ask your boss about this kind of thing. He only knows how to command operations. Research on mutant abilities is the boss's business. But thinking that the boss's anger was still lingering, I gave up. Anyway, he felt that even if he was a sharpshooter, he would be nothing without special training. Chapter 14. A turn of events. What are your plans? Where are you going? Sitting in the truck, George asked the nurse Gabriella and the fat female driver Issa. In the movie, Gabriella sent the mutant children to the border of North Dakota, but it was not just because she read the comics and thought that it was the last refuge for mutants. She is not a child, how could she believe in the comics? In addition, Rikdu, the eldest of the mutant children, also used the radio to contact unknown forces. Because of George's mutant identity and the help just now, Gabriella already had a foundation of trust in George, and did not hide it at this time. We have to rush to the border of North Dakota before 5 o'clock next Friday, and then cross the border to Canada. Why go to Canada, why at that time? George showed a trace of confusion on his face. Gabriella explained. We have checked the relevant information. Before the mutants disappeared, Canada was the most friendly country to mutants, so we took the initiative to contact the Canadian government before we decided to help the children escape. They are also willing to accept these children, but they don't want to cause trouble. So we must rush to the border before 5 o'clock next Friday. At that time, they will try to interfere with the satellites in that area and then meet us on the other side of the border. It turned out to be the Canadian government. George suddenly realized that he had watched the X-Men series, so he knew the general situation, but he didn't know some specific details. He didn't know whether the Canadian government was close to mutants or not so repulsive to mutants. However, he frowned again, because he personally didn't trust the Canadian government very much. The government is not an individual. There are many things to consider, and changing a leader may change a position. Even if the Canadian government did not reject mutants in the past, what about now? Will these mutant children become new experimental subjects after they go there? He would definitely not choose such an unsecured thing. So, he also told Gabriella his opinion. Gabriella was obviously surprised that George, a mutant who had never left the experimental base, could have such long-term considerations. However, her answer was also helpless. There is no way. Even if we know that there may be danger, we have no choice, because we really can't think of a better way. Working in this cruel experimental base, how could they not understand the ugliness of human nature, and how could they not worry that the children would enter another hell after they went there? But they had no choice, because they were all a group of people at the lowest level of society with no power, but the kindness in their hearts had not yet been extinguished. The children would definitely die if they stayed in this experimental base, and there might be some hope if they went to Canada. Yes, sometimes life is so helpless. George also sighed when he heard this. In his previous life, he was also at the bottom of society. He had experienced many helpless choices, but they were not so cruel. But after thinking about it carefully, he didn't have any good way, and he was unfamiliar with this world. But he would not leave his fate in the hands of the Canadian government. After sending these children to the border, he would leave and hide. Risking to save these children was already a humane act. To protect these children, it was impossible to follow them to Canada and be curbed by the Canadian government. Escorting them to the border was already his limit. At this moment, he had obviously forgotten the selfish reason that convinced him at the fork in the road. We are in Juarez. We will go directly to the border after purchasing some necessary daily necessities, then enter New Mexico, and go all the way north to North Dakota. If everything goes well, it will only take 2 days. After 2 hours of high-speed driving, the truck entered the city of Burrs in northeastern Mexico, and George also stuck his head out to look out. He had heard of this city in his previous life, but it was not a good reputation. Burrs, on the northeastern border of Mexico, on the south bank of the Grande River, across the river from El Paso, USA, is known as one of the most violent cities in the world. At its craziest, nearly 15,000 people were killed in crimes in 6 years. This city gathers the largest number of flower vendors in Mexico and is the most important source of flour in the United States. Big news, the CEO of Stark Group, the famous playboy Tony Stark, was kidnapped in Kunar Province, Afghanistan today, and his whereabouts are still unknown. The truck stopped in front of a large supermarket. When Gabriella and Isa went to buy daily necessities, George, who stayed behind, was suddenly attracted by the news broadcast on the TV in front of the supermarket. The incident when Iron Man was born. His body shook, and something suddenly came to his mind, and a smile gradually appeared on his face. Maybe, there will be a new turn of events. Recalling all the Marvel movies he had watched in his previous life, he thought about it carefully and had a new idea in his mind. For him, it is better to believe in the character of Tony Stark than to believe in the character of the government. Although this guy is a little more philandering and proud, his character is still fine. Moreover, as one of the largest capitalists in the United States, even the government can't do anything to him. If he doesn't want to hand over the Iron Man suit, he won't hand it over. Just like Professor X, the reason why he could open a mutant school in New York was not only because the X-Men were strong, but more importantly, Professor X was a wealthy man himself, and his family was also a well-known capitalist. If they could get the protection of Tony Stark, then these mutant children would not only be able to get rid of a lot of troubles, but also perhaps enjoy the education and life of normal people. And he could also have a safe place to study magic. As for whether he would be involved in some subsequent events and face greater danger if he was related to Tony Stark, there was actually no way to deal with this kind of thing. We could only say that we should solve the current troubles first, win a relatively safe period of time to improve our strength as much as possible, and only when we are strong can we do it. Moreover, he also had his own ideas about whether to participate in the major events in the future. If this was the movie universe, he would definitely stay away. Even if Thanos snapped his fingers, he would be rescued in the end anyway, so there was no need to participate. Wouldn't it be better to study magic well? But this is not the movie universe, but an unknown Marvel universe mixed with mutants, so it's hard to say. Because it is very likely that a major event will destroy the entire Earth, and since he lives on this planet, he naturally cannot escape. Rather than leaving his fate to those superheroes, it is better to leave it to himself. Maybe if he helps at a critical moment, he can get through those major events, so that the Earth and himself can be safe. So contact, that is sooner or later. Now, the most important thing is how to rescue Tony Stark and make him owe me a favor. George touched his chin and fell into deep thought. If he wants Tony Stark, the top rich man, to owe him a favor and help them sincerely, it can only be a life-saving grace. But with him alone and his current strength, how can he rescue Tony Stark? He doesn't even know the specific location of the other party, he only knows that it seems to be in a cave in the desert. Chapter 15. Searching for Wolverine. Can I borrow your cell phone? The truck started again, and George immediately asked Gabriella. Before thinking about how to save Tony Stark, he must understand the history and relevant situations of this world in order to make more accurate judgments and more complete plans. And the fastest way in this era is naturally to use the mobile phone to find out online. Of course, here you go. Gabriella took out her cell phone from her pocket without thinking and handed it to George. After getting the phone, George began to search the internet for the information he wanted to know. He did not return the phone to Gabriella until the truck entered the Mexican border and the sky gradually darkened. So that's it. In fact, the history of this universe is not much different from the movie universe, except that there are more mutant elements. According to online news reports, mutants were truly known to the public in 1973. The mutant Mystique assassinated Trask, but was eventually stopped. Mystique became a hero of mutants, and humans began to gradually accept the existence of mutants. In 1977, Quicksilver broke 8 world records in sports competitions, and the sports world began to ban mutants from participating in professional sports competitions. This conflicted with the movie universe, because according to the movie universe, Quicksilver was not born in that year. Quicksilver and Wanda in the movie universe were born in 1990. This also reminded him that many things in the future could not be dealt with completely according to the plot of the movies he watched. After that, the superhero organization X-Men was sought after by the public, and a large number of extended comics about X-Men appeared. The one in the hands of Little Wolf Girl and the others was one of them. Many stories in it are adapted from real events of the X-Men, but there are also a lot of fictions, such as the so-called Garden of Eden. In 1983, the Apocalypse incident occurred, and soon after it ended, the Westchester incident broke out. Professor X suddenly had epilepsy, and his brain went out of control and killed all the X-Men and mutant students in the school except Wolverine, plus more than 600 innocent humans around him. Since then, Professor X has been listed as a weapon of mass destruction by the US government and was wanted, and mutants began to disappear. More than 20 years later, most humans have forgotten the existence of mutants, and even many new generations only regard them as fake characters in comics. For some reason, governments around the earth have been downplaying the history of mutants, as if they want to prove that the government is the biggest reliance of mankind, not mutant superheroes. Before 1973, there was almost no news about the existence of mutants. This is why Rogers became Captain America through the super soldier serum and defeated Hydra. It is probably because Wolverine and Sabretooth were ordinary soldiers with little reputation at that time. Professor X and Magneto were still children, and the Hellfire Club was also hidden in the dark. Have you ever thought about looking for Wolverine and Professor X who may still exist? At this time, George already had a rough plan in his mind. Although the history of this universe has many conflicts with what he knows, some things have not changed in general. He cannot rely entirely on known intelligence, but he cannot completely give up his advantages in this regard. At least the original reason for Tony Stark's kidnapping was probably Obadiah Stannett, who wanted to kill Tony Stark and monopolize the Stark Group. However, his psychic ability was not enough to read the information about the 10 rings from Obadiah Stannett, so as to find the location where Tony Stark was imprisoned, and Professor X was needed to take action. Professor X's brain was out of control from time to time because of epilepsy, but it has improved a lot under the effect of drugs, and he is still conscious in most cases. Maybe he can't be as powerful as before, but simple mind-reading memory should still be possible. After all, he can still chat with the little wolf girl from a distance from time to time. With Wolverine as a meat shield, it is not difficult to rescue Tony Stark with his ability. Although Wolverine is old, he is not a terrorist who can stop him when he is serious. Moreover, when Gabriella escaped, she brought a lot of drugs that can temporarily enhance the abilities of mutants, allowing Wolverine to recover some strength. And most importantly, these two people have rich experience in planning and executing missions, which is something that he, Gabriella and this group of mutant children do not have. To be honest, in this foreign country, he himself is also completely in the dark, even worse than Gabriella. We have thought about it. We have been looking for information about them before, but we only heard that there is a person who looks like Wolverine working as a driver in El Paso, and there are no other clues. And we thought about it. Professor X is also a wanted criminal and may not be able to help us. Gabriella replied helplessly. George nodded after hearing this. In some ways, Gabriella's idea is not wrong. Wolverine and his friends are indeed in trouble. I have a plan now. If it succeeds, then in the future, the children may not need to be controlled by anyone and can live like normal people. Without any concealment, he told Gabriella all his plans. His idea is very simple. If Gabriella agrees, then he is willing to spend more time to help, which is an investment in the future. If Gabriella doesn't agree, then he won't force it. He is not a bad person. After sending the children to their destination, he will leave alone to complete the plan and stabilize in New York. Besides, his choice may not necessarily be the best for the children. They may live a better life in Canada. Upon hearing George's plan, Gabriella fell into deep thought. At this time, she was very conflicted, because to be honest, she had little confidence in the Canadian government. As a Mexican who grew up in Juarez, it was difficult for her to have much confidence in the government. But the plan George mentioned was also very risky. If George and the others failed to rescue Tony Stark in the end, and they missed the time agreed upon with the Canadian government, the children would eventually be captured and brutally killed by the people at the experimental base. Also, will Wolverine and Professor X be willing to help? Seeing the confusion in Gabriella's heart, George added. If Wolverine and Professor. Today is Saturday, and there are 6 days until next Friday. If all goes well, 6 days will be enough for them to rescue Tony Stark. Well, George, thank you so much. Gabriella nodded gratefully. In fact, George could leave by himself without helping them. With George's ability and displayed mentality, it would not be difficult to escape from the lab's pursuit. But he chose to stay to help them and find a way for them to live better. No need. After all, I'm a guinea pig at the experimental base just like them. I can also be considered their older brother. George sighed with a smile. In fact, according to the time of creation, you should be considered the youngest among them. Gabriella seemed to think of something and suddenly laughed. And George couldn't help but smile when he heard this. That's right, it's been less than a year since his body was created, and he is really the youngest mutant in the laboratory. Chapter 16. Early morning in El Paso County, Texas. Logan, who had just delivered his last customer, was sleeping tiredly in his rented extended-length luxury car, but was awakened by the noisy sound outside. What the hell? Cursing angrily, he had to get up with difficulty and push open the car door. He often encountered this kind of thing. It must be those gangsters who smuggled over from Mexico. They took a fancy to his luxury car and wanted to remove the wheels and sell it for money. However, he couldn't let those gangsters succeed at this time, because he still relied on this rented car to make money, and now he needed money very much. The professor's illness requires money to buy medicine. He has been saving money to buy a yacht and take the professor to live a safe life on the sea. After living for so many years and experiencing the death of his friends and loved ones, he was actually tired of his own life. The only thought now is to give Charles, his only old friend who redeemed him and is still alive, a decent old age life. And if these gangsters were to take off the wheel, not only would he have to pay the rental company, but he would also be unable to maintain this stable job. Hey, these nuts are all chrome-plated and have been damaged by you guys. You guys, leave quickly. Holding the car door, Logan tried to persuade these gangsters to leave without using violence, but the result was obviously not what he wanted. When the gangsters saw the car owner appearing, they did not run away immediately. Instead, they raised their hands and shot Logan, and then continued to remove the wheels. Killing seems to them to be as simple as eating and drinking. Logan's self-healing ability has been greatly reduced due to the toxins in the adamantium alloy, but such injuries are not enough to kill him. He stood up and slowly released his wolf claws, stepped forward and started fighting with the gangsters. But due to his aging body and lack of adequate rest, he was soon beaten to the ground by 6 gangsters. He could only protect his head with his hands and look for opportunities to fight back. George, can he really still help us now? In the big truck, Gabriella asked worriedly. They changed the route and drove to El Paso County. After 4 hours of searching, they finally found traces of Wolverine Logan, but the current scene made her lose some confidence. George smiled and nodded. Of course you can, and it can help a lot. Don't look at Wolverine like this now. If he really gets ruthless, no one will be able to match him. If a way to remove the adamantium alloy toxin can be found in the future, Wolverine's body will return to its peak youthful state. You must know that Tian Kai also gained the ability to heal himself, but he has lived for thousands of years without any aging. You guys wait for me here, I'll go talk to him first. Pushing open the car door, George jumped out and used his power to control 2 daggers and swipe them at the necks of those gangsters. For this kind of gangster who has no moral bottom line and kills innocent people at will, he will naturally not have any kind thoughts and will aim at the vital points. Swish, brush, brush. There were several sounds of the trachea being cut by sharp blades. The gangsters who were kicking Wolverine instantly covered their necks and fell down in disbelief. Wolverine noticed the abnormality and let go of his arms, also looking surprised. At this moment, a hand reached out to him. It's okay, Wolverine Logan. Friend, you may have mistaken the person. I am not Wolverine, but thank you for your help. Logan did not stretch out his hand, but slowly stood up by himself. George didn't pay attention, retracted his hand and continued. My name is George, and I am a mutant. We have 35 mutant children here. We need your help and the professor's help. Mutants? Mutants have disappeared long ago. There are no mutants in this world, and there are no Wolverine or Professor. Wolverine shook his head and squatted down with some difficulty, trying to pick up the nuts scattered on the ground and restore the car's tires. George stretched out his hand and the scattered nuts on the ground instantly floated up and fell into his hand. There are indeed not many mutants that appear naturally, but there are still many mutants created by man-made experiments. For example, I am a mutant synthesized using the genes of the Professor and Magneto. Who are you? When Wolverine saw the nut floating in the air, his eyes showed a vigilant look, and the wolf claws of his hands stretched out again, although one of them was stuck halfway. George paused when he saw this, and then waved in the direction of the truck parked on the side of the road not far away. After a while, Gabriella slowly walked over with the wolf girl and other 35 mutant children. Show Mr. Logan what you're capable of. The little wolf girl stretched out her adamantium alloy wolf claws, and Rico raised an earth wall from the ground. The other children also used their own abilities, controlling wind, fire, plants, water, and electricity. There are also breathing cold air and so on. Although the power is not great because it has not been developed yet, it can indeed prove one's mutant identity. Mr. Logan, George didn't lie to you, we just escaped from the Institute of Genetic Modification in Mexico City, they. Gabriella explained her experience and the situation of the institute in detail. After hearing this, Wolverine took a deep breath, looked at George and the children, and refused with some difficulty. I'm afraid, I can't and don't have the ability to help you. He didn't care about his own life or death, but the professor's current situation did not allow him to be involved in such a troublesome matter. If he didn't handle it well, he might cause the professor's death. So even if he couldn't bear it, he still refused at this time. Gabriella's eyes dimmed when she heard it, but George had expected it and did not give up. He knew the reason why Wolverine refused, and he also knew that Wolverine was essentially a kind person. As long as he gave a reasonable step, it would be easy to convince the other party. I accidentally saw the relevant information about the Westchester incident at the experimental base. You drove so hard to make money, probably to cure the professor's illness. You help us, in fact, you are also helping the professor and yourself. If we follow our plan, the professor will get the world's best medicine and equipment treatment in the future, and maybe he can return to normal. But have you ever thought that the famous playboy Tony Stark may not repay us, but may even sell us out? Not everyone in this world is willing to repay you after being saved. Many may even retaliate against you for their own benefit. Wolverine was silent for a moment and replied. He has a deep understanding of this kind of thing. He once saved an officer on the battlefield of World War II. As a result, when the officer was about to die of old age, he actually coveted his self-healing ability and wanted to kill him and take away his self-healing ability so that he could survive. Chapter 17, Border Factory. Hearing Wolverine say this, George not only did not worry, but smiled. Since Wolverine has already considered this direction, it means that he guessed right. Wolverine is just hard-mouthed but soft-hearted, and he still wants to help in his heart. What kind of person is Tony Stark? We need to see him and then judge. If he is not trustworthy, then you can also get a sufficiently generous reward through this matter and leave. With money, you can take the professor to live the life you want, and don't have to care about us anymore. So, what do you think? I need to think about it. Wolverine took a bottle of strong liquor from the car seat, gulped it down in one breath, then closed his eyes and thought for a long time, and then slowly replied. Okay, I promise to help you, but there is a condition: you can't take the professor with you. The professor's situation is not as good as you think. He can't actively control and use his abilities, and once his figure appears in New York, it will cause panic in the government, which will be more troublesome at that time. No problem. George thought about it and nodded. He only thought about using Professor X's ability, but forgot the impact of Professor X's weapon of mass destruction entering New York, and maybe even S.H.I.E.L.D. would be attracted. Rather than that, it's better not to bring it. Anyway, at most, Obadiah will be tortured severely. I believe that under the threat of death, the other party will honestly tell the whereabouts of Tony Stark. In fact, this is also good. After all, Professor X is still inconvenient to move. Only he and Wolverine can move, and the efficiency is much higher. Then let's leave here quickly. The gangsters just fired a gun. I guess the police will come soon. Seeing that George had already negotiated, Gabriella couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, and then looked at the bodies of the gangsters on the ground and hurriedly reminded. And Wolverine bent down again, ready to press the wheel again. Don't worry, it's because of the gunshots that the police won't come so quickly. Okay, then they are really responsible. At this time, George also squatted down, and his hands kept changing gestures. Repair as before. The repair spell took effect, and the wheel that was originally removed was automatically restored immediately. This is the second spell he can cast with gestures. It seems that you have more than just the Professor and Magneto's genes in your body. Wolverine saw this and showed a surprised look on his face. George smiled and shrugged. In fact, I'm not sure how many genes they have integrated into my body. Your situation reminds me of a friend who used to be very talkative. He also had a lot of mutant genes integrated into his body and his mouth was sealed. Wolverine thought of the memory deep in his mind and couldn't help sighing. It's a pity that they are all gone now. Friends, the old ones go and the new ones come. Life must go on. Don't be so pessimistic. George comforted casually. In fact, he has always had a question in his mind, that is, whether the current Wolverine has experienced the reversal of the future, whether he has the memory of two different timelines, or whether there are no two timelines in this universe. In the X-Men's reversal of future past, changing the past will also change the present. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, changing the past only extends a new timeline and will not change the present. However, it is not easy for him to ask about this kind of thing now, so he can only wait until he is familiar with it in the future. Wolverine looked at him in surprise. It seems that you really have some of the Professor's genes in you. After the car was repaired, Wolverine drove a luxury extended car in front to lead the way, and Isha drove a truck with George and the children followed closely behind, driving all the way to the border. The Professor's situation is special, so Wolverine hid him in a border area with almost no people. This used to be a factory opened by a multinational smelting company headquartered in Shanghai. In the end, it had to be abandoned and left because of the chaotic public security. Normally, no one would come here. The car stopped in front of an abandoned factory building on the border, and Wolverine introduced it to George. It is precisely because El Paso is close to Mexico, and a large number of Mexicans have smuggled here to live, and the public security is chaotic, that they can hide and not be discovered. If they were in a city with good public security, it would be impossible to hide. Logan, who are they? At this time, a man wrapped in a scarf and a hat, with only two eyes exposed, walked out of the factory carefully, and looked at George and the group of mutant children with some doubts. Caliban, these children are all mutants, go in first, and I will tell you in detail. Wolverine waved his hand and led everyone into the factory. George glanced at the man wrapped in a scarf, and the relevant information flashed in his mind instantly. Caliban, a mutant with the ability to track the location of mutants, was once a black market businessman who made huge profits by selling the traces of mutants. He also helped the Yakley Gene Company to hunt down mutants for money. Later, he got albinism and could no longer see the sun. He began to repent for the crimes he committed and began to help Wolverine and Professor X hide their traces. At the end, he saw Professor X being killed, and in grief he detonated 2 grenades and died together with the enemy. So for now, he is considered a trustworthy mutant. No wonder. No wonder he always said that he was communicating with some people and that there were many new mutants. It turns out that there are indeed some. But Logan, are you really determined to do this? It's very dangerous. In the factory, after listening to Logan's words, Caliban frowned tightly. He sympathized with those mutant children, but he was more worried about Wolverine's safety. There were only 3 of them in the old generation of mutants, and after all these years of getting along, he had already regarded Wolverine and the Professor as his only relatives. George is right. Maybe this is the only way to really cure the Professor. You also know that the water tank can't trap the Professor. This is not a solution. We need money, better equipment, and drugs to treat him. Besides, I don't believe that the Canadian government will treat those children well. There are no good people in the human government. Wolverine threw a bag of medicine and a card to Caliban. These medicines are enough for the Professor to use for a month. This card contains all the money I have saved over the years. I originally planned to buy a yacht to take you and the Professor to live on the sea. If something unexpected happens and I don't come back, I'll trouble you to take care of the Professor. Okay, I know I can't stop you. I can only tell you that if you don't come back, then I won't take care of that difficult old guy alone. I will leave him and leave with this money alone. Caliban took the medicine and the card, was silent for a moment, and finally replied with a smile. Wolverine also smiled for the first time after hearing this. You won't, otherwise you wouldn't have given up so much money you saved and chose to help us. It's your turn to feed the medicine. I've been tossing all night. Caliban shook his head helplessly, took out a bottle of medicine from the bag and put it in Wolverine's hand. Obviously, he was hit by Wolverine. Chapter 18, Encirclement and Counterattack. Is this the famous Professor X? He looks much younger than in the movie. George looked at Professor X, who was pushed out of the water tank by Wolverine, and thought to himself. Think about it, if it is 2029 in the movie, Professor X is already 97 years old, but in reality it is 2009, and Professor. If Professor. At this moment, he decided that when he went to Hogwarts to learn magic in the future, he would also spend more time on healing magic. If modern technology cannot cure Professor. You know, Professor X is the most powerful psychic in the world. He can read the thoughts and memories of others without physical contact, directly deprive and control other people's thoughts and actions through his psychic abilities. If coupled with a brainwave enhancement machine, it can even kill all ordinary humans and mutants on the Earth. New species, new mutants, okay, Logan, you must help them, they need you. Professor. He grabbed one of Wolverine's hands tightly. Wait, and you will have a new family. Don't give up on yourself. Everything will get better. Then promise me, you won't give up. They also need your guidance, just like you once guided us. Wolverine's eyes slowly became determined, as if he had become the fearless fighter he once was. At this time, George came over. Without further ado, those people at the experimental base won't let us go like this, and we can't stay here for too long. Now we are divided into 2 groups. Logan and I go to New York to find a way to save Tony Stark. Professor, Caliban, Gabriella, and Issa, you took your children to the North Dakota border to wait for news from us. Please note that a copy of Logan was created at the experimental base. Caliban, you must always pay attention to whether there are new mutants approaching. If you find any, you must move as soon as possible. Logan's clone. Caliban's pupils shrank, and then he pointed in the direction of the guide. If I sense correctly, the guy you mentioned is here. Looking along Caliban's finger, a long motorcade faintly emerged on the empty land in the distance. George narrowed his eyes. It's faster than I thought. It's good to take advantage of this opportunity to solve it, otherwise there will be trouble later. He had already expected the pursuit of the experimental base. With the financial resources and status of Yockley Gene Company, it was not difficult to obtain corresponding monitoring through local agencies. With a truck as big as theirs, it was impossible to hide their tracks. If it were before, it would be quite troublesome to be caught up, because even if he could use magnetism to change the trajectory of bullets and transform into a super sharpshooter, it would be of no use to X-24. When the bullets run out, he will die. But now it's different. It's not that Wolverine can defeat X-24, it's that he knows that Wolverine has an adamant alloy bullet, which was originally reserved for suicide, and can just deal with X-24. After killing X-24, there won't be much danger at the experimental base for the time being. If you want to create another Wolverine clone, it won't be that fast. In this way, when they go to save Tony Stark, they don't have to worry about the children being threatened by the experimental base. If there was a chance to kill Xander Rice, that would be even better. I have a plan. Turning to look at Wolverine, he quickly stated his response strategy. On the other side, Commander Donald, sitting in an armed jeep, was also making strategic arrangements through the intercom. In a moment, I will surround the factory and not let anyone go. If there is any abnormal movement, kill him directly, especially experimental subject number 757. Following his boss's orders, he mobilized all the connections he could, and soon found traces of the large truck. He also discovered that the escaping mutants had come into contact with Wolverine, who was hiding in El Paso. In fact, they already knew about the traces of Wolverine and the Professor. The reason why they were not hunted down like other mutants was because the boss said that it would be more uncomfortable for them to let them linger like now than to kill them. It's just that now that the escaped mutant children are mixed with Wolverine and the others, it's a bit difficult to handle. So after getting the boss's consent, they brought X-24 this time just in case. Originally, the boss wanted to come over in person to see the actual combat effectiveness of the X-24, but he was slightly injured in the previous laboratory explosion and was worried about No. 757's marksmanship, so he stayed at the base. There were a total of more than 20 vehicles in the convoy, which surrounded the dilapidated factory building. Each vehicle was filled with strong men wearing body armor and loaded with live ammunition. After getting off the vehicle, they occupied various shooting points with their guns raised. Close to 100 people. A certain distance away from the factory building, there was a sniper lurking on the roof of an armed vehicle about the same size as a bus. Inside the vehicle was the final killer X-24. I didn't expect to meet you in this way, Wolverine, my former idol. Hand over those children, and I won't disturb your and that old man's peaceful life. Donald took off his sunglasses, put his hands behind his back and looked at Wolverine standing alone at the door of the factory, his tone full of ridicule. Looking at that look, it is obvious that he didn't take the once famous Wolverine seriously at all. Sorry, I don't know what you are talking about. This is private territory. Please go out. Wolverine thought about George's strategy of delaying time before, and resisted the urge to stab this bastard to death with his claws, and patiently persuaded. Donald pointed to the big truck at the door. You disappoint me so much. You may not be able to afford the price of deceiving me. I don't know who the truck belongs to. There is indeed no one you are looking for here. Wolverine still denied it. Donald gestured to his men behind him, and more than 20 people immediately rushed into the factory with guns. About 5 minutes later, they walked out of the factory and shook their heads at Donald. Donald raised his eyebrows, looked around, and finally locked his eyes on the abandoned water tank next to the factory with a smile. What a good idea, I guess they must be there, including the old guy. It's just an ordinary reservoir, there's really no one you're looking for here. Wolverine's face changed, and he slowly put one hand into his pocket. Donald ignored Wolverine and directly signaled his men to search the reservoir. At this moment, Wolverine quickly took out a tube of reagent from his pocket and quickly stabbed it into his arm. Chapter 19. It's decided to be you, little wolf girl. Not good. Donald immediately stepped back after reacting. Of course, he recognized the reagent, because it was developed by their experimental base and was specifically used to improve the abilities of mutants in a short period of time. Once Wolverine is injected, his strength can be restored to its peak before the drug expires. Wolverine at his peak is definitely the most terrifying killer. Sniper, target Wolverine. However, the response from the intercom was, X-23 and Experiment 757 are found, they are attacking me. Release X-24 to deal with them, you continue to snipe Wolverine. After letting his men take over, Donald ordered the sniper. He didn't know how X-23 and Experiment 757 escaped silently under their tight siege, but it didn't matter. As long as X-24 was released, he could definitely deal with the two. According to the experimental data, X-23 is definitely not an opponent of X-24, and no matter how accurate the shooting of the experimental subject 757 is, it can't hurt X-24, and it belongs to the type that is completely restrained. The most important thing now is Wolverine, who has recovered his peak after taking medicine. In just a few words, the opponent has killed 10 of his elite men in the heavy siege and rain of bullets. If the sniper rifle is not used to restrict his actions, he and all the remaining people may be harvested by Wolverine. No wonder the boss has such a special liking for Wolverine. Received. The sniper over there fired a gunshot, and Wolverine was directly hit and knocked down by the sniper rifle. Others immediately rushed up and suppressed Wolverine with bullets to prevent him from getting up. On the other side, George and the little wolf girl were running towards the bus. They did not escape from the heavy siege, but left the factory in advance before the other side surrounded them and hid behind nearby obstacles. When the opponent's attention was all attracted by Wolverine, he quietly rushed towards the car that was obviously holding X-24. As long as X-24 could be dealt with in advance, the battle would be more than half won. However, what he didn't expect was that the opponent actually valued them so much and brought a sniper, which didn't appear in the movie. Fortunately, he brought the little wolf girl with good combat effectiveness just in case. If the sniper aimed the gun at him, well, he would just raise the little wolf girl as a shield. After all, with the little wolf girl's self-healing ability, even if she was hit by a sniper rifle, she would not be killed. Although it was a bit cruel to do so, if it really came to that, there was nothing he could do. It was a life and death fight. If they failed, it would not be just him who died, but everyone, including the more than 30 mutant children. It's just that the little wolf girl's body is too small to block his whole body, so he can only choose to raise it to block the upper body, which has more vital parts, and the two legs running wildly in the lower body are not so easy to be hit. However, he has wizard blood and amazing vitality. Even if he is accidentally shot, as long as it is not a vital part, it is not so easy to die. When he gets closer, he can affect the sniper. At present, he can't change the trajectory of the sniper bullet, but he can still affect the sniper body and make the gun body shake and unable to aim. In fact, the situation is better than he expected. The sniper did not turn the gun head to them in the end, but continued to aim at the factory. Obviously, Wolverine helped them attract enough attention. But he didn't ignore them, but released the fierce-looking X-24. Come on! Seeing that the back door of the bus had been opened, Wolverine's copy X-24 jumped out and roared towards them. George couldn't help but look happy. The opponent's operation was exactly what he wanted. At the same time, 4 elite soldiers got off the bus with X-24, but they did not come with X-24. Instead, they set up a camera, as if they were going to record the scene of X-24's battle. In fact, these soldiers knew how terrible X-24 was, and they did not believe that X-23 and Experiment 757 could win. Recording the battle video of X-24 was the request of the Elder, because this was also a practical test of X-24, and the video must be recorded for analysis afterwards. Seeing that he was getting closer and closer to X-24, George picked up the little wolf girl, then raised his hand and took out the submachine gun and shot X-24 twice. He did not use the adamantium bullet immediately, because if he killed X-24 now, the sniper would react immediately, and others would also focus on attacking him. It would be dangerous at that time. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he was still unwilling to use the little wolf girl as a shield. So he had to take advantage of the other party's relaxed vigilance and get as close as possible. Once the distance reached his ability, he would have room to play as a sharpshooter. Bang! Bang! The 2 bullets shot straight at X-24's eyes. The bullets could not kill X-24, but it would take time for the injured eyes to recover. Seeing George shooting at him, X-24 immediately raised his arm to block in front of him. Unfortunately, George's bullet was not straight. It suddenly turned into an arc before meeting X-24's arm, and finally hit X-24's eyes accurately. X-24's eyeball was blown up, and he immediately screamed and stopped. The eyeball can be restored, but the pain will not be reduced at all. It's decided to be you, little wolf girl. While X-24's eyes have not recovered yet, George threw the little wolf girl out with all his strength. Go kill that sniper! The little wolf girl flew over X-24's head, landed with a tactical roll and stood up, and rushed towards the sniper and 4 soldiers on the bus without hesitation. At this time, X-24's eyeball had recovered, and immediately grabbed George with one claw, so fast that George didn't have time to react. Swish! Although George had retreated in time, the submachine gun in his hand was still split in half by X-24's claw. The second claw was George's neck. It's really cruel. Seeing this, George also took a breath of cold air, and then the magnetic force burst out with all his strength, concentrating on X-24's arm. Although he is not Magneto, who can easily control Wolverine, whose body is made of adamantium alloy, the force of several tens of kilograms on X-24's arm can definitely cause a significant impact. Sure enough, due to the effect of magnetism, X-24's arm suddenly paused, allowing George to dodge again. George did not want to fight, and took the opportunity to bypass X-24 and rushed towards the bus. Because he felt that he was being played by George, X-24 was furious and turned to chase George. George did not fight him head-on at all. He knew that he could not beat him, but just kept using magnetism to affect X-24's limbs, cleverly avoiding X-24's attacks again and again, and then kept approaching the bus. There was no way he had acquired the ability for too short a time. Even if it was enhanced by the wizard bloodline, it was still not fully developed now. Originally, his body was developed to the limit of 100 kilograms of magnetic control, but at the beginning he could only use 10 kilograms. Later, he had the wizard bloodline and could use dozens of kilograms now. If he is given a few more years to adapt, the limit of his strength development is estimated to be several hundred kilograms. With several hundred kilograms, he can easily lift X-24 into the air and ravage him as he wants. Or if he learns magic for a while longer, he can easily knock him down with a stun spell. In general, there is a lot to look forward to in the future, but it is not possible now, so this is the only way to operate. Chapter 20. While George was dodging the X-24 attack in a somewhat awkward manner and approaching the bus, the little wolf girl had already rushed to the bus. The 4 soldiers who were filming found that the little wolf girl was approaching, and immediately took out their submachine guns and fired at the little wolf girl. The little wolf girl was also very experienced in combat. She was thin and flipped and jumped like a real wolf, dodging most of the bullets shot at her vital parts as much as possible, and endured the pain caused by the remaining bullets, and fiercely pounced on the 4 people. She had been trained in various killing techniques since she was a child, and she had long been accustomed to this kind of battle. The sniper on the bus felt bad when he heard the movement below, and immediately gave up continuing to assist in sniping Wolverine in the factory, and turned the gun head to the little wolf girl below. The little wolf girl had just fought and killed 2 soldiers, and was immediately shot in the chest. This shot was different from the previous ones. It was so powerful that it actually hit her directly and flew out, causing her to scream in pain. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the remaining 2 soldiers quickly stepped forward and pressed down the little wolf girl's arms and legs, making it impossible for her to get up. After all, the little wolf girl is still a child. Although she has good physical fitness and killing skills, she is still not as good as an adult in terms of pure strength, especially these 2 muscular strong men. No matter how she struggled, she couldn't get up. I want to see if you can recover after I blow up your head. The sniper turned his head to see the experimental subject number 757 fleeing in a panic under the attack of X-24. It is estimated that it will not last long, so a trace of cruelty appeared on his face, and he aimed the gun at the head of the little wolf girl who was pressed on the ground below. He didn't believe that the little wolf girl would be fine after being hit in the head by a sniper rifle. If 1 shot didn't kill her, 2 shots, 3 shots, if it really didn't kill her, it would be a pleasant thing to hear the other party screaming under his gun. Almost. At this moment, George also found that the little wolf girl over there was restrained. He calculated the distance and knew that it was time to shoot. He used his full power to act on X-24's ankle, causing her to stagger and miss her attack. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he did not continue to run away, but took out the pistol that had been hidden in his chest. He opened the safety and pointed the pistol at X-24's temple. Game over. Bang! With a gunshot, the first adamantium bullet that was loaded went down the barrel and shot into X-24's head, killing her with 1 shot. Hearing the gunshot here, the sniper who was originally preparing to shoot the little wolf girl's head subconsciously looked up at the experimental subject number 757. When he found that X-24 fell down and did not move, his face suddenly changed. He quickly turned the gun head again and aimed at the experimental subject number 757 who was running towards this side. How could this happen? However, at this time, he found that his sniper rifle was shaking involuntarily, and even wanted to fly out of his hand. Although he tried his best to suppress it, it was useless, and it even got worse. How can you aim accurately when the gun is shaking like this? He barely fired a few shots in a row, but all of them missed. Bang! Bang! The remote-controlled sniper rifle shook and ran in an S shape to avoid several sniper shots. Seeing the effective range of the pistol, George raised his hand and shot 2 shots at the 2 strong men who were suppressing the little wolf girl. The 2 strong men were shot in the head and fell to the ground one after another, and the little wolf girl also broke free from her restraints, inserted her claws into the bus, quickly climbed to the roof of the bus, and pounced on the sniper. She was very vengeful. If the other party hit her with a gun, she would hurt him. Commander, X-24 was killed, be careful of X-23 and the experimental subject. Seeing X-23 flying towards him, the sniper knew that he was going to die, and hurriedly reported to Commander Donald on the intercom, but he was only halfway through the report when his chest was pierced. George came to the bottom of the bus and saw the bloody little wolf girl dragging the sniper's body off the roof. He couldn't help but twitch his lips. Okay, it's okay, leave it to me next. He touched the little wolf girl's head, picked her up, and took the submachine guns and sniper rifles of the 4 soldiers. He came to the driver's seat of the bus. If it weren't for the special situation this time, he didn't want the little wolf girl, who was still a child, to join such a cruel battle. Putting the little wolf girl on the co-pilot seat, he touched the sniper rifle and couldn't help but sigh. Thank you for the sniper rifle. His current ability is not enough to change the trajectory of the sniper bullet, but it doesn't mean he can't in the future. Think about a sniper rifle with a range of more than 2,000 meters and can turn. What a powerful killer it is. He started the bus and rushed towards the factory. After reaching his ability, he directly smashed the glass in front of the bus, and controlled 4 submachine guns in front of him to fire at full power. Countless bullets shot out in arcs. In the factory, Donald looked at Wolverine, who was half kneeling on the ground and panting, and taunted. The effect of the drug has worn off. I wonder how long you can hold on. To tell you the truth, your backup, the experimental subjects number 757 and X-23, will probably be captured by my men soon, and then I will send you all off together. Just as he finished speaking, he heard the sniper's report and screams from the intercom. Wolverine laughed at this and stood up again with his strong willpower. It seems that we are going to send you off. Commander, it's bad. The bus is rushing towards the factory. Our people can't stop it. At this time, a team leader rushed in from outside the factory. You are good. It won't end like this. Retreat. Looking at Wolverine standing there, who didn't know how much fighting power he had left, and the fierce gunfire and screams coming from outside, Donald gritted his teeth and fled with the remaining less than 20 men in the car. Seeing that Donald finally escaped, Wolverine couldn't hold on any longer and sat on the ground. A moment later, a bus broke through the factory door and rushed in, stopping in front of Wolverine. The door opened, and George and the little wolf girl jumped down from it. Are you okay, Logan? Not dead yet, these sons of bitches. If it was 20 years ago, none of them would be able to escape. Wolverine stood up with difficulty. Don't swear in front of the children, but Logan, your performance just now is no worse than 20 years ago. At this time, Professor X pushed the wheelchair out of the water tank with everyone. Seeing this, George said, although we have temporarily repelled them, we should not stay here for long. According to the previous plan, everyone should pack up and set off in 2 groups. George, we have decided not to go to Canada. The professor is right. If we rush before Friday, the time is too tight and it will be too dangerous for you. We can't be so selfish. At this time, Gabriella suddenly stood up and spoke to George. Chapter 21. Just now in the water tank, Gabriella and Isa witnessed the battle outside through the surveillance, and had a clearer understanding of the fighting power of Wolverine and George, and the professor said something to them. According to the professor, it is almost impossible to rush to New York in just 6 days to find news about Tony Stark and go to the Middle East for rescue. Even if it is really completed, it is also full of dangers. This is actually taking risks with the lives of Wolverine and George. Moreover, the knowledgeable professor does not recommend that the children go to Canada and let the Canadian government arrange their future lives. So after careful thinking and discussion, they decided to completely abandon the previous cooperation with the Canadian government, no longer go to the North Dakota border, but find a safe place to settle down first. Then plan how to rescue Tony Stark. Even if this plan fails in the end, as long as they work together, they can defeat those people in the experimental base who felt impossible to defeat before, and live with the children. This time, the opponent came with such a large lineup, but they were beaten and fled in embarrassment. In the past, they thought it was impossible for them to fight against the powerful Acre Gene Company alone, but now it seems that it is not impossible. As expected of Professor X, even if his abilities cannot be used, his ability to persuade people with his mouth is really incomparable to ordinary people. George's eyes lit up when he heard Gabriella's answer. He naturally agreed with Gabriella's decision to rescue Tony Stark in 6 days. Although he had the advantage of the plot, it was not as easy as the professor said. In New York, the forces are complicated, and who can guarantee that everything will go smoothly? If there is enough time to prepare, his ability development can be improved to a higher level, he can deflect sniper bullets, or learn a few more magic in Hogwarts, then the success rate will naturally be greatly improved. The key is that if he remembers correctly, Tony Stark told Pepper in the car in the movie that he was locked in the cave for more than 3 months. So normally, they don't need to be so anxious. Or if he becomes strong enough in the past few months and can get a sum of money to buy shares of Stark Group, then it seems unimportant whether to save Tony Stark or not. He saved Tony Stark for money, so that Tony Stark can protect them and live a normal life. But if they are strong enough and have money, there is no need to find Tony Stark. Because finding Tony Stark for cooperation will inevitably attract the attention of S.H.I.E.L.D., and being noticed by S.H.I.E.L.D. means being noticed by Hydra, which will lead to greater trouble. 6 days is indeed tight. Since you have made a decision, let's leave here first, find a safe place, and then discuss what to do next. George nodded to Gabriella, and then led everyone to collect the submachine guns and grenades on the bodies, and then quickly left the abandoned factory. In the current situation, as long as they leave the border now and go to a slightly farther place, it will be difficult for the people in the experimental base to reorganize their manpower to find them. Ackley Genetics can retrieve the surveillance of this small border town because it is chaotic enough here, and many things can be solved with money. But they are not regular national organizations such as S.H.I.E.L.D., FBI, and CIA. On the surface, they are just businessmen, and it is impossible for their influence to spread throughout the United States, otherwise they would have been eliminated long ago. In the movie, if Donald had not used Caliban's tracking ability, it would not be so easy to find Wolverine and the Professor. And now that X-24 has been killed, before creating a new replica, it is estimated that the other party will not come to hunt them again, and they can't beat them at all. So if nothing unexpected happens, after this war, there should be no movement at the experimental base in a few months, and they can plan the next step with peace of mind. On the highway, Issa was driving a large truck in front, and George, Gabriella, Wolverine, Caliban, and Professor X sat in the shed behind with the children, discussing their next destination. After a discussion, several people summarized the following points. First, the place where they are going to stay next cannot be in the city center, which will easily expose their whereabouts and attract the attention of the government and Ackley Genetics. Second, they can't stay in a place that is too remote, because whether it's the education of these children, the medicine needed by the professor, or their lives, they can't be satisfied in a too remote place. Also, it's hard to get money in a too remote place. If you don't take the route of rescuing Tony Stark, you have to get money to buy Stark shares. How to get money quickly? Normal methods will definitely not work. The so-called gold belt for murder and arson is naturally robbed from others, such as those businessmen and gangs who violate the law. There are few people in too remote places, let alone rich people, so naturally you can't get any money. Third, you can't be too far away from New York. On the one hand, they still need to continue to pay attention to Tony Stark's news trends and be ready to rescue plans at any time when they have news. On the other hand, George himself has another reason, that is, New York is a concentration of major events, especially in a few years, there will be an invasion of the Chitauri, he must be nearby for easy observation. If nothing happened, he would not have to participate. If something unexpected happened, he would have to prepare early. Otherwise, if he was practicing magic and the whole earth was destroyed, he would not be able to survive. In fact, we can go back to school, back to Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. After summarizing, Professor X suddenly said. However, Wolverine's face changed when he heard it, and he immediately rejected it. No, it's too dangerous. The government is still looking for you. Going back to school is like walking into a trap. In fact, he was not worried about the government's wanted. After all, that happened 25 years ago. They have not appeared in 25 years. The leaders of the government are probably going to change several times. The current person in charge should have thought they were dead a long time ago. What he was worried about was that when he returned to New York and returned to school, the professor would remember those deliberately sealed memories and remember that he killed all the mutants in the school. Professor X's eyes instantly shed 2 lines of tears when he heard this. Logan, you know, when you just fought, I remembered everything that happened. With the crimes I committed, I should have been dead long ago. But now, I want to live, not for myself, but for these children. I want to recover my abilities, protect the hopes of these mutants, and make up for the crimes I committed back then. At this point, Professor X choked up and continued. The brainwave room made by the beast in the basement of the school, after closing it, activate the special switch, which can close my brainwaves, so that if there is an accident and it goes out of control again, the same tragedy will not happen again. Chapter 22. Xavier School for Geniuses. Professor, you can't be blamed for this. You didn't do it on purpose. Just like what you told us, it also applies to you. Wolverine sighed and comforted him. Back then, the reason why mutants were feared by humans was that a small number of them used their abilities to commit crimes. Most of the time, it was because when mutants began to show their abilities, they were unable to control their abilities due to their inner fear, which led to the involvement of their relatives, friends, and innocent people around them. Every time these mutant children were taken to school, the professor would give them psychological counseling so that they could muster up the courage to live again. In fact, the professor was just like those children. Because of epilepsy, his brain lost control, and such a tragedy happened. He felt more pain than anyone else. I'm not a child. Since I made a mistake, I have to bear it. I can't make up for the dead, I can only find a way to make the living live better. The professor looked at the group of children in front of him and smiled again. If he hadn't seen these children and had hope in his heart, he would probably never be able to face his painful memories and would have been in a daze until his death. But Professor, so many years have passed, the school may have been taken away by the government a long time ago. At this time, George spoke up. The location of Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters is indeed good. It is located in the suburbs of the Bronx, New York. It is not too remote, but it is also a distance away from Manhattan, where many incidents occur. Even if the Chitauri invade, it will not spread there. The most important thing is that, according to his understanding, the Bronx is the most chaotic district in New York, which is located in the northernmost part of New York. It is mainly inhabited by African and Latin American descendants. If Hell's Kitchen is the most chaotic place in Manhattan, a wealthy area, then the Bronx is the most chaotic place in New York. There are all kinds of gangs, and the crime rate is one of the highest in the United States. Such a place is just right for him to make money in troubled waters. Even if he kills someone, it will not attract the attention of the government. However, after so many years, how could such a big castle still be empty? Professor X wiped his tears and explained. Although I am wanted, it is not an open one. The government does not want to make a big deal out of it, and there is not enough evidence to arrest me. So my identity is still there, and most of my assets are still there, including the castle. It's just that I can't show up, and I can't use any assets, otherwise the government can follow those clues to find and arrest me. I see. George is not clear about this, but after Professor X's explanation, he can roughly understand it. Professor X's identity is secretly the principal of the mutant school, but in public he is the heir of the famous Xavier family, a real big capitalist. If you say it, it is more influential than the Stark Group in some aspects. The rise of the Stark Group is mainly due to Tony's father Howard, who was not actually a big group before. But the Xavier family is a noble family with a long history, with a long inheritance and deep roots. Without solid evidence, arresting the heir of the Xavier family and confiscating all the property of the Xavier family will make all the old capitalists feel a sense of crisis. Because you can raid the Xavier family without evidence today, and you can find a reason to raid them tomorrow, and everyone will be in danger. And can the government produce solid evidence that the professor killed people? Of course not. The professor has epilepsy and his brain is out of control. He directly killed the people around him with mental power. Even in the surveillance, everyone suddenly collapsed and died. There is no way to prove that it was the professor who killed them. On the other hand, we have to consider the negative impact. If it is confirmed that the professor who helped the government deal with crises many times before and was received and awarded by the president many times killed so many people at once, then the government will also be responsible, and its influence will decline, and even the president will be greatly affected. So at that time, they could only arrest and detain secretly, and could not put it in the open, and even the whole incident was deliberately downplayed. If so, it's really a good choice. George thought carefully and approved Professor X's proposal. The Westchester incident happened 25 years ago, in 1984, when Tony Stark was only 15 years old and had just entered the undergraduate program of the Department of Electrical Engineering at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Captain Marvel Carol Danvers had not yet become a pilot, Nick Fury was just an ordinary S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, and Star-Lord Peter Quill was only 6 years old and his mother was still alive. So perhaps no one really cared about the mutant school being empty there. It is estimated that the police sent by the government to search at that time could not even find the basement under the school. I have no objection, as long as the children are safe. Gabriella also raised her hand in agreement. He thought that since the professor and George thought it was feasible, there should be no problem. She was just a Mexican nurse with shallow knowledge. What she had to do was to take good care of the children, not to express her opinions randomly. She knew her position very well. Seeing that everyone agreed, Wolverine no longer objected. In fact, he wanted to go to the school again, because it was his spiritual harbor. As for Caliban, he went wherever the professor and Wolverine were, not caring about the specific place. So the truck changed direction and drove all the way to New York. Because there were too many children and none of them had identities, they did not go into the city along the way, but just bought supplies in some small towns along the way, and drove to remote places to rest when they were tired. After 2 days, they finally arrived in the Bronx in northern New York. Perhaps because he faced himself, the professor's condition improved a little. Although he could not use his abilities as before, it was no problem to occasionally affect the thinking of ordinary people. This also made their journey much smoother. During the period, in order to prevent being tracked, they also changed trucks many times. Sell the truck to a second-hand market, and then go to another second-hand market to buy a different model of second-hand truck with a little money, and keep switching. After arriving in the Bronx, they did not go directly to the school where the professor's 4 garden castles were transformed, but George and Wolverine disguised themselves and went to find out the bottom first. The situation was indeed as the professor expected. It had been empty and unoccupied. It was just that the castle had been uninhabited for a long time and looked much more dilapidated. After making sure that the school was safe, they took the children and quietly entered the school at night and lived in the basement of the castle. The basement of the castle had 2 floors. In addition to the professor's brainwave amplification room and the former X-Men training room, there were more than a dozen vacant rooms. Everyone could make do and live there. Chapter 23. X-Fighter and Modified Motorcycle. There are still planes. George was stunned when he saw the X-Fighter in front of him. He didn't expect that the X-Fighter was still in the school basement. He thought it had been driven away by Wolverine and Professor X when they were escaping. Wolverine took off his suit and shirt, changed back to his favorite jacket, and explained to George with a cigar in his mouth. "It's a pity that I can't fly a plane, otherwise I wouldn't have been so embarrassed when I took the professor to escape." At that time, the professor's brain went out of control and killed all the mutants in the school. In order to save the professor, he drove the professor directly to the hospital. Although the professor's condition eased later, they were also arrested by a large number of agents sent by the FBI. If he could fly a plane at the time, he could take the professor out of the United States directly and go to other countries to treat the professor, and he could also escape the government's wanted list. It's good to have it. It will be useful in the future. At this time, George remembered that Wolverine not only couldn't fly a plane, but also seemed to be a little afraid of heights and airsick. In the movie, it is usually the Beast, Mystique, Storm, Cyclops, and Phoenix who take turns to fly the X-Fighter. But this is not a bad thing. Although this X-Fighter is a fighter from more than 20 years ago, it is not much worse than the most advanced Quinjet of S.H.I.E.L.D. because it was modified by Beast, a highly intelligent scientist. Not only is it fast, it can also be invisible and shielded from satellite reconnaissance. In the future, as long as one of them learns to fly an airplane, they can rely on this X-Fighter to evacuate everyone in time when they encounter any danger. For example, the Chitauri invasion of New York was not effectively stopped. By the way, you can ride this motorcycle when you go to the city to investigate intelligence in the future. It is Scott's favorite. After special modification, it is 3 times faster than the fastest motorcycle in the world. After visiting the X-Fighter, Wolverine took George to find a normal-looking motorcycle in the basement. Wolverine, the Professor, and Caliban are too conspicuous and cannot appear in the city often, otherwise they will inevitably be discovered by the government. They can only help at critical moments. So the task of going to the Stark Group in Manhattan to find out information about Tony Stark will depend on George himself. It seems that Scott has good vision. George took a test ride on the motorcycle and showed a satisfied look on his face. Since the journey was smooth and the Mutant Academy was better than he expected, he no longer planned to contact Tony Stark so quickly and expose himself to forces such as S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra. So naturally, he didn't need to go to Manhattan to get intelligence, and he didn't need to kidnap Obadiah to torture Tony Stark's location in the Middle East. However, he still needed to use this motorcycle to go to the downtown area of the Bronx to get information about local gangs and bad businessmen. Because he planned to go to the downtown area of the Bronx to make a big deal before Tony Stark escaped. At present, his own plan is to study magic hard in the first 3 months. After 3 months, he will clean up all the rich and powerful gangs in the entire Bronx, get a lot of money, and buy crazily when the Stark Group's stocks are at their lowest. Then sell them all after Tony Stark comes back and the Stark Group's stocks rise. When Tony Stark announced the closure of the weapons department of the Stark Group and stopped selling weapons, he would buy them crazily again, so that he could instantly have a large amount of wealth, so that he and the children in the school would not have to worry about money. Of course, this kind of thing can only be done once. If he goes to clean up the gangs every day, it will inevitably attract the attention of Kingpin, the ruler of the underground world, and other forces. If you walk by the river, you will get your shoes wet. If you do it too much, he and the mutant school may be exposed. But if you only do one deal, run away after it is done, and never show your head again, in the Bronx where there are few cameras, even Sherlock Holmes can't find him. So this deal must be a big deal, and you must scout the place in advance to collect intelligence. He has a good eye, especially when it comes to women. I used to hate that guy, but now I miss him a little. Wolverine looked at the motorcycle and couldn't help but fall into memories. George immediately understood when he heard it. He knew that Cyclops and Wolverine both liked Phoenix, but Phoenix finally chose Cyclops. By the way, we will definitely use electricity when we use these facilities in the basement. Will it attract the attention of the government? Or we should buy some generators. Although the power is not that sufficient, it is much safer. 25 years have passed. The government has probably forgotten about the castle here, and will not keep an eye on the castle's electricity consumption. However, he thinks that it is better to be cautious in everything. It is rare to find such a good retreat. If it is exposed, we have to find it again. After he learns the Muggle shielding spell, he will not have to be so cautious. Even if the school is reopened, he will not have to worry about being discovered by the government. You can rest assured about this. The electricity consumption of the 2 basements has been specially modified because of a special accident before. The Beast has added a special power supply system, which is different from the power supply above the castle. It has also carried out a lot of defense upgrades. Even if the facilities are fully opened, no traces of electricity will be found. Wolverine waved his hand at George's reminder. That's good. Special accident? Is it the invasion of Apocalypse, or William Stryker leading his troops to attack the college? George didn't ask about this in detail. Anyway, it didn't matter which one it was. What mattered was that he knew it was safe here and he could study magic with peace of mind. I will take time to go outside to gather intelligence during this period. If possible, I think you and the professor can help guide these children and learn how to use their abilities to fight better." Finally, George also made a suggestion to Wolverine. Since the battle simulation room in the basement can be used normally, it can be used to train the children to use their abilities to fight. Unlike the rough training of the layman in the experimental base, the real experts like the professor and Wolverine can better develop the potential of the children. He didn't ask these children to play most of the roles in the battle in a short time, at least it would be good to be able to protect themselves and not become a burden. Acre Gene Company will never let them go like this. It will be a matter of time before they find them based on the traces. At that time, it may not only be the copy of Wolverine, but also the copy of the Professor, Magneto, and Cyclops. Of course, George believed that the strength of those copies must be very different from the original. Because except for some special types, many mutants' abilities need to be developed and comprehended in order to exert stronger power. Just like Magneto, he was not that strong when he first appeared, and it was Professor X who developed and guided him to become stronger later. The clones made by Sandor Rice have an IQ similar to that of a child, and their actions are basically all remotely controlled. How could they develop their abilities? Major William Stryker in the movie used Wade as his main body and integrated so many mutant abilities, but he was still beheaded by Wolverine and Sabretooth. Facts have proved that unless the mind control is released, the clones cannot grow beyond the main body and can only become miscellaneous soldiers. It's just that too many miscellaneous soldiers are also a headache. Chapter 24. Actually, if you don't tell me, I also have such a plan. If it were before, the professor would not have agreed with the children being exposed to fighting so early, but now, he must be very willing to allow these children to have more ability to protect themselves. Wolverine agreed with little hesitation. In the former mutant school, Professor, it is up to you to decide what kind of job you want to do in the future and what kind of person you want to be. Only if you really want to stay in school and become an X-Men as an adult, you will be trained in combat. However, the situation is obviously very different now. In order to survive better, even children must learn to develop their own abilities and learn to fight and protect themselves. If every child could have the strength of Little Wolf Girl, together they would not be afraid of being hunted down by the Acre Gene Company. Okay, then have a good rest. After George and Wolverine inspected the entire two-story basement, they each returned to their rooms to rest. They have been rushing for the past 2 days and have not had a good rest. Now they can finally fall back and sleep peacefully. Just like that, 4 days later. As usual, George went to the Bronx to collect intelligence. When he came back, he immersed himself in studying magic. At night, he focused mainly on his own clone in the Harry Potter world. While the main body of the Marvel world was busy escaping from prison, the clones were not idle either. Except for the occasional reception of Tonks and her colleagues, they were basically studying magic theories and learning to practice new magic. But today is an exception, because today is September 1st, the day he is leaving to go to Hogwarts. Peppa, let's go. After placing the cage containing the giant owl, George locked the door of the shop, pushed the cart filled with luggage, and walked out of Nocturne Alley. Paige is the name he gave to his pet owl, because this owl is super edible. If he hadn't inherited the legacy of the old wizard, he wouldn't have been able to keep such a big pet. But if you can eat it, you can eat it, and it is indeed very useful. In order to prevent the store from being visited by dark wizards while he was in school, he had discounted all the potions and herbs in the store that he could not use in the past few days. It's just that few of the wizards who come to his store to buy things are easy to deal with. If he hadn't seen Peppa Pig, a giant owl, standing on the beam of the shop and staring eagerly, he might have made some small moves. For example, he used a confusion spell to make him confused and gave away expensive potions for nothing. Pushing a cart that was taller than himself, George walked out of Nocturne Alley, then turned into Diagon Alley. After about a few hundred meters, he came to a seemingly ordinary red brick wall. He took out his wand and tapped on a few specific bricks on the wall. The bricks on the wall immediately began to shake, and soon a wide archway appeared in front of him. Continuing to push the cart through the archway, he entered the famous Leaky Cauldron in Diagon Alley, a wizard hotel-style bar that integrated food and accommodation. He had eaten here several times when he was free. To be honest, the taste was average, the environment was average, and even a little dirty and cramped. After extending his hand to say hello to the boss, Old Tom, George did not stop at the Leaky Cauldron, but went directly to the Muggle Street outside the bar, and then stood quietly on the roadside and waited. Originally, he planned to take the Muggle subway to King's Cross Station, but the last time Tonks took his colleagues to eat at his place, they knew that he was going to King's Cross Station today and had to drive over to see him off. After waiting on the roadside for about 10 minutes, an old-fashioned dark green car drove over from a distance and parked next to him. "Hey, George, you're 10 minutes early." Tonks opened the door and got out of the passenger seat. George smiled and replied, "I'm used to doing everything a little early so I don't have to rush. This is a good habit, but it's a pity that I haven't been able to develop it." Tonks laughed and helped George move the luggage into the trunk of the car. She had a carefree personality and was very fast-paced in her work. Invisible stretching charm. Seeing Tonks put a lot of her luggage and Peppa Pig into the small trunk easily, George had a look of surprise on his face. The Traceless Extension spell is a magical spell that can expand the area of space. A wizard who is proficient in this spell can even expand a small box to the size of a city. Just like the famous magical zoologist Newt Scamander, he made such a large suitcase by himself. However, according to wizarding laws, wizards are not allowed to use this spell for private use, and can only be used on public items approved by the Ministry of Magic. For example, during the International Quidditch Tournament, magic tents were rented to wizard audiences from various countries. Of course, saying that, because this spell is too convenient in life, most wizards will still use it secretly. As long as they are not caught by Aurors, it doesn't matter much. It seems that you have been studying very carefully recently. This trunk has indeed been used with the Traceless Extension charm. But don't worry, this is a special Auror vehicle of the Ministry of Magic, and it is a legal modification. Tonks closed the trunk and winked triumphantly at George. She is still a trainee Auror, but due to her outstanding performance, she can already use the Ministry of Magic's Auror-specific magic car. Excellent! George gave a thumbs up. On the surface, Tonks is 19 years old and George is 11 years old. Tonks is a big sister. But in fact, Tonks's mental age is 19 years old, while George's mental age is already in his 30s, much more mature than Tonks. "Good morning, George." After getting in the car, a young male wizard wearing a bright green velvet suit sitting in the driver's seat waved and greeted him. "Hey, if you go to Hogwarts to study, we won't have free meals in the future." "Good morning, Aldo, you can wait for my vacation, which will only take a few months." George smiled and replied. He knew this guy. He and Tonks had come to eat a few times. He was very obsessed with the Chinese food he made. He was a classmate who graduated at the same time as Tonks and is now a trainee Auror in the Ministry of Magic. And he could see that this guy was pursuing Tonks, but Tonks only regarded him as a brother. It can only be said that love cannot be forced. Tonks likes uncle types like Lupin, and is not interested in handsome young men like Lardo. Don't listen to his nonsense, go to Hogwarts and study magic well, it is really a very good school. Tonks sat in the passenger seat and hit Lardo on the back of the head, then turned to Xiaoji and said. Lardo touched the back of his head, and was used to it. He skillfully started the magic car and drove towards King's Cross Station. Chapter 25. Hogwarts Express. Magic alchemy, I must study it carefully in the future. In less than 20 minutes, the magic car stopped outside King's Cross Station. George refused Tonks's kindness to send him in, while pushing the cart and thinking to himself. In fact, the road from the Leaky Cauldron to King's Cross Station just now was not so smooth, just in time for the traffic jam. But the car of the Ministry of Magic obviously also added high-level space magic with alchemy. Aldo just pressed a button, and the car was like compressed, easily passing through the gaps between the cars that were less than one person wide. The spells in this world are very magical, and all kinds of magic items made by alchemy are also very magical. After learning magic alchemy well, he can completely transform the mutant school into a magical castle similar to Hogwarts in the future. Ordinary people can't break in without his permission. 9 3/4 Station. Coming to the partition wall between the 9th and 10th platforms, George pushed the cart straight into it. Then, something magical happened. He and the cart seemed to hit a transparent water curtain and passed through it without any hindrance. The scene changed, and a very special platform appeared in front of him. The most conspicuous one was the Crimson Steam locomotive, on which it was written, Hogwarts Express, departing at 11 o'clock. He had seen the introduction of this magical magic train in a special magic history book before. If you want to have a deep understanding of the magic of this world and be able to live in the wizarding world in the future, mastering the knowledge of magic history is also a top priority. Many methods of learning and cracking magic can actually be seen in the history of magic. So he would spend a certain amount of time every day to study the various history books he bought. The Hogwarts Express was built in the early and middle 19th century by a Muggle engineer, a large number of Muggle railwaymen, and most of the wizards in the Ministry of Magic at that time. This magic train route also used the world's largest number of forgetfulness spells and the largest scale of Muggle expulsion spells. The reason was that the then very responsible Minister of Magic, Ottoline Gamble, felt that it was too unsafe and uncomfortable for young wizards to use portkeys to go to Hogwarts. Every year, young wizards were lost due to improper use of portkeys. Inspired by the Muggle steam train, the Hogwarts Express and the super long railway route were created. It is said that this move was protested by some pure-blood families, but was strongly suppressed by the Minister of Magic on the grounds that they would not be admitted to Hogwarts if they did not take the train. This magic steam train travels between platform 9 and 3/4 of King's Cross Station in London and Hogsmeade Station, a total of 6 times a year. School starts once on September 1st, 4 times at Christmas and Easter, and once in June. At this time, the thick smoke of the steam engine filled the sky above the platform. Because George came early, there were not many young wizards and wizard parents on the platform, and it was not noisy. He pushed the cart into the carriage marked for the first grade, found a compartment at random, stuffed his luggage neatly onto the upper shelf, and then placed the cage containing the owl in the corner of the compartment next to him. Sleep well, don't scream and scare the little wizards who will come later. After telling Paige, George took out a book on the importance of basic magic theory and began to read it attentively. It takes about 5 or 6 hours to get from London to Hogwarts, so it can't be wasted. As time went by, there were more and more wizards on the platform outside the window, as well as various magical pets, and little wizards gradually entered the carriage. Wow, is this your pet? What a big owl! A little boy with a magic camera hanging around his neck was attracted by the huge owl Page when he was pushing his cart past the compartment where George was, and walked in involuntarily. He put his luggage in the corner, picked up his magic camera and took a few pictures excitedly, then introduced himself to George. "Hello, my name is Colin Creevy. Just call me George." George looked up at the boy and nodded with a smile. He was somewhat familiar with this name. It seemed that he was a crazy fan of Harry and liked to take pictures of his idol Harry the most. "George, Colin was very lively and talkative. He sat next to George very familiarly and started chattering. At this time, George had to put away the magic book and chat with him for a few words. Through the chat, I learned that Colin was born in a Muggle family and had a younger brother, Dennis Creevy. Because he was particularly fond of photography, after seeing the magical magic camera in Diagon Alley, he bought a magic camera with the money for buying a pet. The idol he admired most was Harry Potter, who was mentioned in A History of Modern Magic, The Rise and Fall of Black Magic and Important Magic Events in the 20th Century. He was only 1 year older than him, but he defeated Voldemort, who frightened the wizarding world. "By the way, George, I've said so much, but you haven't told me about yourself yet." After a long chat, Colin realized that he didn't know George at all. In order not to continue talking, George smiled and said, "I am an orphan, I have never seen my parents, and I have no family, so there is nothing to introduce." Colin was stunned when he heard this, and then a sympathetic look appeared on his face, and he quickly changed the subject. "By the way, your owl is so big, what does it usually eat?" European owls usually appear in Europe, Asia, and Africa, and mainly inhabit mountain forests, plains, wilderness, forest edge shrubs, sparse forests, and exposed mountains and cliffs. It likes to eat farm rats, hares and pheasants, and sometimes frogs, snakes, and lizards. It is said that it is one of the rare owl species that is not afraid of the gaze of the basilisk, and the other is the legendary phoenix. At this time, a somewhat trance-like voice suddenly sounded at the door of the box. George and Colin turned around to look. It was a little girl with silver eyes and dark golden brown hair. Her skin was very fair and her eyes were big, but her eyes were not focused. Therefore, the overall temperament seems a bit erratic and strange. The eagle owl is not afraid of the gaze of the basilisk. "I don't seem to see any relevant introduction in the book," George asked, looking at the girl in surprise. Since he bought an eagle owl as a pet, how could he not look for relevant information, and he had read most of the information the girl just mentioned in the information, except for the last one. However, whether this last one is true is quite important, because there will indeed be a basilisk in Hogwarts this year, and it is a 1000-year-old basilisk. So he had to verify it carefully.